Johnson.
Here.
Ms. Maxwell.
Here.
Ms. McIntyre.
Here.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Here.
Mr. Wells.
Here.
Mr. Chairman.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 voting members present.
I declare quorum is present and we are duly convened. And first, what we'd like to do is offer our sincere thanks to Dr. Patrick Davis, Vice President for Stanton TCAT and Extension Campus Blue Oval City, and to Dr. Jacqueline Rainey, President of TCAT Jackson. This morning I did follow your recommendation. I got up, I drove by the Blue Oval City. It is a massive building, and it just shows how important what you're doing here is to be able to fill those jobs. And one of the things we used to do is silo K through 12, higher ed, workforce. We now look at things P through 20, preschool through the workforce. And I think this is a good example of how we're melding that by you hosting us here, and we would like to hear any words that you might have. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you.
So good morning again. I'm Jacqueline Rainey, and I am the president of TCAT Jackson in this amazing facility here in Stanton. And we're just so thrilled and just so grateful that you've had an opportunity to be with us on yesterday and today. We're just excited about the opportunities ahead with this Blue Oval initiative, our partnerships, working with our K through 12 schools. We're gearing up for a brighter and a bigger workforce, and the opportunities that we have with our community here is limitless. So we're just thankful and grateful that we have the opportunity to be here and to actually host and be a part of our community and across our other educators across the state of Tennessee. And so we're just thankful. I hope that you all have had a productive first day, and I hope the second day is productive as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we are in the 8th Congressional District, this is represented on our state board by Mr. Larry Jensen. I'll ask you to say a few comments.
Thanks for coming over to the western part of the state. And it's the room that we are in and the place that we're in. I said yesterday, I appreciate you doing it. Just make sure you drive up there and see what's going on. The first is SK, the second is Ford. And just exciting. We're trying to figure out how we get kids from all over West Tennessee up here with opportunity for what we saw yesterday in that tour. And I just appreciate y'all being here, and come back soon and often.
Thanks, Larry. And I couldn't go without a special thanks to Katherine Johnson for what she's done in working to put this thing together. It's taken several hours. She's got a staff that's helped her and stuff, but we'd like to give Katherine. This time I'd like to ask Dr. Sarah Morrison to give us an overview of the workshop we had yesterday.
Well, I can't help but add on to that thank you to Catherine, because I've seen how much she's done and how many things she's had to move through. These out-of-town meetings take a little planning, and we're so grateful for the partnership with the TCAT here and the folks who've helped. But Catherine, we thank you as well, because it's not been a small undertaking. We had a very full, wonderful day yesterday for those of you that joined us. We started with a 2-hour tour of the TCAT and Blue Oval facilities, which was remarkable. I thought I had an idea of what we were walking into, and it really just blew my mind. What's happening around here and the opportunities that provides for this region and for our state, for our students and families that will be able to take advantage of these programs and the workforce, educational workforce connections that are being made here on this campus. We had some excellent presentations after that. We heard from Memphis, Shelby County, and Cognia, and the Department of Education around a pilot program in the school turnaround space that's been underway for several years. And particularly, we heard from 2 amazing principals from Memphis, Shelby County, who were able to speak to the work that they've been leading and the results that they're getting for students in some really challenging situations in the schools in Memphis. So that was really a standout presentation yesterday. We also spent some time with Christy Brown and David Laird from the Department of Education, walking through not only the summer programming and the tutoring and some of the impact that those programs have been having across the state and the results that we're beginning to see, but also the TCAP data from this past school year and looking at our results as a state. Then we had a really robust conversation as well with board members and, again, Dr. David Laird and Jonathan Criswell from the Department of Education around the Opportunity Charter Schools and accountability framework that will be coming to the board at a special called meeting in December. So like I said, it was a very full day, really robust discussions, a lot of learning, and look forward to another great day today.
Thank you. Any other board members like to make any remarks at this time? Well, I would like to recognize a special person who's been with us for some time now and who's going off to finish law school, Liliana Shuffo. And if you would come forward, Liliana is a law student. Yeah, come on up here this way. I'll walk around too. Is a law student at Belmont College, and she has how much to go, Liliana? 4 more months. 4 more months. And she's actually going to be moving to the St. Louis area here shortly, but you've been a great attribute to us, and we'd like to give you a certificate and get your picture taken. We'll come around there.
Nobody can hear me, right? And I've just had such an incredible experience working with y'all, working with everybody. Thank you especially to the legal team, Brian, Todd, Danielle, Rachel, Taylor, Tisa, and Alex. Of course, they're not here today, but Alex was an incredible supervisor, and everybody on the legal team helped me learn so much. I'm really passionate about education law, and it was really a great experience to work with and, experience and learn from everybody. And especially, Catherine and Bree, my first friends at the board. I'm just really thankful for y'all and for everybody that I've met along the way. Just thank you all for an incredible experience. I've had such a great time with the board. I was so happy when Alex asked me to stay on in the fall, and I'm just really grateful for all of you. And I'm not going to talk anymore because I'm definitely going to cry. But just thank you to everybody.
Thank you so much. We'll move on into our agenda. First, I want to remind presenters to identify themselves by their title and position for the record when presenting, and also remind presenters that the use of acronyms or jargon should be explained so that all Tennesseans, whether here or watching on TV, will understand what we're talking about. First item on our agenda are our consent items. We have 4 items under the consent item: the adoption of the agenda, the minutes for August 16th board meeting, teacher licensure discipline settlement approvals, which have already been addressed, and state board training advisory committee member appointments. Is there any action that board members would like to take at this time? Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms.
I would
Maxwell.
like to request that item 4Q be bumped from the consent agenda.
Say that again.
Item 4 under teacher licensure discipline actions, letter Q.
Okay. So item 4Q, this is one of the items that we'll be taking up under item 4 to be moved out. Any other suggestions? With no objection, then when we get to the teacher license discipline items 4, we will pull that out as a separate item. Any other changes to the adoption of the agenda or the items of consent? If not, can I have a motion then to approve the consent item with this modification? Mr. Wells. Mr. Wells moves. Is there a second? Mr. Holt seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor then for accepting the consent items with the change made by Ms. Maxwell, signify by saying aye. Aye. Approved. Opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item are our report items. First item on the list are our State Board of Education member reports. This is an opportunity for us to share the activities that we've been doing since our last board meeting. And I think there have been a lot of activities, so I will open this up to any board members who would like to. Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Nathan James and I were able to do a day in the districts thanks to his arranging this. We met with the director of schools there, Ricky Inman, and he took us to 2 different schools. There's 9 schools in that district. There's, according to the 2022 status, there were 2,020 something students across the 9 schools. What made this county so unique is that one of the schools we went to, Frank Hughes, it has a pre-K through 12 all under one home. And that they had like 279 students. They graduated 19 last year, but a very warm family type of community. And then when we went to Wayne County, that school, they had 3 married couples actually teaching in the school, which is kind of unheard of. We met with the teachers at Frank Hughes. We met with the students at Wayne County. And it was just a great experience for me. It was my first day in the district. So I want to say thank you to Nathan for setting it up, and just if y'all ever get to go there, it's worth going. And the families, the people, the students, the teachers, they were all very warm and welcoming. It was a great day.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Those days in the district are very important, and it's when you get to see what's going on and why we do what we do. Thank you for that. Other reports from any other board members? Yes, Mr. Wells.
So I too had a day in the district, and thanks to the staff for setting it up. It's one of those things that I think it's maybe one of the most impactful things that we do. But I know the staff gets frustrated. It's always hard for us to find a day to take out of our schedule, but you always walk away, very impacted. So we went to Murfreesboro City Schools, and Mr. Holt and Dr. Maxwell joined, which was great to have them in my district and to be able to brag. But we were at Black Fox Elementary with Dr. Duke, and I tell people this all the time. I mean, he is an absolute rock star. I love having him in my district. He's somebody that I definitely go to for advice on things. But we had probably the best student panel that I have had. Yeah, Dr. Morrison feels the same way. They were so engaged. I even told my 13-year-old when I got home, I learned more about their education than I do his, because he gives me 3 words every day when I ask him how it went. But it was just a really great day. And another thing that I really noticed was when Dr. Duke opened up, he talked about his vision for the school system and things like that. Then when we talked to the principal, you could tell she had taken his vision and puts it into her daily life. And you think, well, that's pretty easy for a principal to do. But then when we talked to the teachers, you could tell they were taking his vision as well. And so that really stuck with me. It's a great school in a great district with a great superintendent and staff. So it was really, really, really great. And then another thing that I've done, it's a little bit of, state board, and then also I sit on the Governor's Rural Education Fund board as well. And so I was able to go to the Ayers Foundation 25-year anniversary. And I think that's something that the things that the Ayers Foundation does with embedding counselors in the schools and really having an impact every day on them to set them up for post-secondary is absolutely amazing. And I told Dr. Morrison at some point I would love for us to hear from them. And I just think the symmetry that we have would be really, really good. So thank you so much for letting me take that time.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Jensen.
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh.
Allie set up a visit in Knoxville about 3 weeks ago, and I think Dr. Maxwell and Bonzi and Jordan, we all got to visit Emerald Academy, a charter school, and also Knoxville Prep, and it's an amazing experience. And I feel like I'm so blessed because in my teacher role, you sometimes get tunnel vision, and there's just not opportunities like that where I I'm at to see a charter school, and we definitely deal with issues with that. So it was really interesting, and Emerald Academy, they were just rock stars. We got to see a lot of teachers, and they all really cared, and the principals there, and they had people from the community come and just brag about Emerald Academy, and it was, I was really happy to be able to have that experience.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Jensen?
We had Governor Lee came to Memphis, and Daryl and I were there. We'd invited him down to come see the Kingsbury Career and Technical Education Center. And it was really interesting because he was very, very engaged in touring around, talking to the kids. And I have a picture of him, which I'd be happy to share with you, of him underneath a truck with the kids, not on the ground, but up on a lift. And he's there talking, and he was totally engaged with those kids to hear about asking them questions. And so I just thought, you know, at 16 or 17 years old, and you're in an automotive training class, and the governor of the state's underneath, that has to have an impact. And the programs there, we have 4 of those centers, primarily in the vice chairman's district, but we do a lot of stuff together because we work with the same school system. So it was a really wonderful day of his engagement, but probably more importantly, the interaction with the students, was just really fun and encouraging to watch.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Vice Chair Cobbins.
Mr. Jensen didn't tell you that he was my boss 20 years ago, so I just go wherever he tells me to go. Had the opportunity to visit Beacon College Prep in Memphis, which is a charter school, really large English language learner population. Spent a half day with their leadership team. And one of the questions I asked them was if I could take a message back to the state board and other folks at the state, what would you want us to share? And so they said that social and emotional learning is really a big issue when you consider the past 4 or so years and everything that young people have gone through, especially in the early years as they come from being at home and transitioning into early learning environment in elementary school, that they come with a lot of issues that need to be addressed. So I wanted to share that, but it was a great day and had an opportunity to learn a lot more about their new leadership team and the great work that they're doing. Also, about a month ago, had the opportunity to serve on a panel for SCORE, where they released the quality credentials framework model that they're suggesting, where we can hopefully align across the state around opportunities to prepare young people for work opportunities that align with their learning and that can point them in the direction of economic mobility. So we'll make sure that that report gets distributed to the board members. And also had an opportunity a few weeks ago to join staff and Chair Eby and Dr. Morrison in meeting with the group of students from Vanderbilt who were wanting to know more about the state board and how it operated. So it's been a busy couple of months. Thank you.
Any others?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Mr. Mullenhour.
I just want to add a couple comments to what Ms. McInturf said a second ago. In fact, we had such a strong showing that I think I was told at one point that if we had one more member, we were going to have to give notice of the meeting because it was so well attended. It was a great experience. Quick shout out to Steve Diggs and Hannah Hopper who hosted us. That organization and its sort of sister organizations has made a huge impact on the Knoxville community. Specific to education, they're in their, I think their 10th year. They're now up for their 10-year renewal as a charter school. And one of the things that we tried to convey to Steve and his team is just how grateful, I'll speak for myself, how grateful I am that Emerald has done such a great job setting a standard and proving out the concept. And in fact, proving it out so well, they're up until just recently, they were the only charter school in Knox County, and they really, I think, again, just did a great job of setting that standard. And in fact, did it so well, they have a wait list of 200 plus students. It was eye-opening for me to hear just how much demand there is for what they offer. And we got a chance to talk about some of the constraints. In fact, some of the constraints that are pertinent to some of the content we're even considering now, and that being facilities, just not having enough room to service the kids that are in need and that are wanting what they have to offer. So Steve did a great job hosting us, and just wanted to highlight that they've really been a standard setter for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mullenhour. Yes, Ms. Maxwell.
So I had the opportunity to join Mr. Wells and staff and Mr. Holt at the Black Fox Elementary. It was a fabulous visit. Thank you for allowing me, Warren, to come along. I really have to shout out to Dr. Trey Duke and Principal Tiffany Stroville. She is doing a fabulous job, and it was just very inspiring. All of the committees that we met with, the children, it was just a great day. Also, I did get to join Mr. Mullenhour and Mrs. McInturf and Bonzi in Knoxville with Emerald Academy and Knoxville Preparatory School, and it was a very informative visit. They were very welcoming, and I appreciate the staff and faculty there. And also, I was able to attend the Teacher of the Year ceremonies in Nashville that the department hosted. And because I truly believe in recognizing our outstanding teachers and the things they do. And Chairman Evie and our director, Sarah, was there also. And so I appreciate that opportunity. And I want to thank the department. They did a very nice job recognizing our teachers.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to add on a couple of other things too. Executive Director and her family and my wife and my granddaughter and I got to attend SCORE's 15-year celebration at Senator Frist Farm. That was a pretty exciting place, and SCORE is one of our collaborative organizations that we work very closely with. Also attended the NASB annual conference in Louisville, Tennessee, Louisville, Kentucky, thank you. There is Louisville, Tennessee. My brother-in-law lives in Louisville, Tennessee. Louisville, Kentucky, thank you. In the Excel in Ed National Conference in Oklahoma City. That one had some outstanding speakers. Dan Heath was a speaker. He wrote a book called Upstream, talking about the importance of moving upstream to the problems that you have to actually get to the root cause of the problems and how you solve them. And then Nathan James and I served on a panel at Cleveland State Community College that was put together by Senator Adam Lowe with Dr. Linda Cash and the superintendent from Bradley County and the superintendent from Cleveland City Schools. And it was a Q&A session, sort of rapid fire, was broadcast over radio, and I thought that was a very helpful discussion that we were able to talk about what we're doing across the state of Tennessee. And then with Vice Chair Cobbins and I, we are serving on the Fast Forward Summit committee put on by SCORE for their next upcoming summit. When is it? February? Coming up in February, so I encourage y'all to participate in that. Again, just some of the examples that we do serving as board members when we get out in the state with our constituents. That's where the action takes place. That's the fun things to do and why we do what we do. So thank each one of you for participating in those activities. Okay. Next item is Educator vacancy report. Oh, let's see, take that back. Tennessee Early Literacy Educator Pass Rate Report. Ms. Christy Wall.
Good morning, Christy Wall, Assistant Commissioner for the department over academics and instructional strategy. Wanted to brief you on the Tennessee Early Literacy Assessment Report that has been shared from the department with you all previously. As a reminder, the purpose of this report is to communicate the first-time pass rates of applicable candidates on the Tennessee Early Literacy Assessment, also referred to as the TELA. I'll try and refrain from using that acronym, but this is pursuant to TCA 45, 49, 5, 5619, Section D. The assessment is to ensure that all educators are adequately trained on foundational literacy skills beginning August 1 of 2023. Also, to ensure that the Tennessee Literacy Success Act requirement that endorses teachers to teach in grades kindergarten through 3 and instructional leaders to complete this foundational literacy skills assessment or professional development in order to acquire, renew, or advance their license. If you recall, the department launched this assessment following state board's approval and communicated the assessment's availability to our different stakeholder groups both in August and September of 2023 across those various groups. The assessment tests educators' knowledge of foundational literacy skills standards, and the passing score was set at an 80% pass rate. The assessment aligns to educator preparation providers' foundational literacy standards and the emphasis of the use of high-quality instructional materials. This assessment is uniquely designed for Tennessee educators and teacher candidates. If you'll recall, the Tennessee Early Literacy Assessment is not a substitute for any required assessments found in State Board of Education's professional assessments for Tennessee Educators Policy 5.105. But this is one option for certain educators to meet the requirements of the Tennessee Literacy Success Act, again, to acquire, renew, or advance their license. The assessment is free to test takers and ed prep providers, and test takers can access the assessment as many times as they wish. In looking specifically at the report, page 6 illustrates the different reporting categories of the pass rates for educator candidates. You'll see a column that's listed as other. You'll see a column that's listed as out-of-state licensed educators. You'll see a column that references Tennessee educators renewing or advancing their current license, and then also Tennessee teacher candidates seeking licensure. Again, this information is self-reported based upon the test taker who's engaging with the assessment. Included in the report, 28 EPPs are represented in the data, but only 10 EPPs had 10 or more users. EPPs must have at least 10 users for the department to share the data to protect users' data privacy. You can see the EPPs that had at least 10 users that engaged in the assessment that is listed in the report. Again, I mentioned that test takers can access the test multiple times, and it's free to their use. The first time pass rate for our teacher candidates seeking licensure is listed at a 39.2% pass rate. You can see that if they attempt the assessment more than once, it bumps up to a 60.8% pass rate. I will also call out that this assessment alone is one of 2 pathways to meet the Tennessee Literacy Success Act requirement. There's the standalone assessment, which this report encompasses and includes, and then there's the training pathway. The training is asynchronous modules. It's available on our website, and we have current teachers, aspiring teachers, leaders, and others from out of state that are able to access that training and content on the department's website. Data obtained from the assessment demonstrated an overall first-time pass rate of 40.2% in total. Because there are multiple ways to demonstrate knowledge of literacy instruction, some individuals elected to abandon or complete a different literacy assessment, or perhaps the training pathway, either through the early reading training, Module 1, or the secondary literacy training, Module 1, which contributed to the pass rate. The Tennessee Early Literacy Assessment is one of 2 approved pathways to demonstrate compliance with the Tennessee Literacy Success Act. Educators have the option of the assessment, like I mentioned previously, or the training pathway to meet these requirements. The department will continue to monitor the participation of the data that's coming in through this assessment. Again, this is the first year of implementation, and so this is our first formal report to you all after it's been implemented, but we will continue to monitor participation and pass rates and review assessment data and report to stakeholder groups as needed. Happy to take any questions on this particular report or the item in general.
Questions? I have a couple of questions. So 40.2% pass rate first time, and after they take it multiple times, only 60% pass rate. Seems very low to me, and would seem like it has some implications for our teachers and ultimate classrooms. I know there's another pathway they can take, but can you help me understand why only 60% of the people after taking it multiple times can pass the exam?
Yes, Chairman, that's a wonderful question. We were a little surprised when the data came in and was evaluated after a full year of implementation. You know, the department works cross-functionally and collaboratively across the human capital team that supports our ed prep providers, as well as the academics team that support teachers in the field and the implementation of the Tennessee Literacy Success Act. You know, we will continue to invite and include ed prep providers into our convenings, our regional opportunities for learning and deeper implementation practices around those new foundational literacy skills standards. It's difficult work, and we are realizing this and very cognizant of the data. We want teacher candidates to be successful. We want teachers to be successful. And so the areas of support and communication and guidance that we can connect both to our teachers in the field and our teacher candidates coming in from our ed prep programs needs to be tightly aligned and very seamless. And so ensuring that there are opportunities for our ed prep providers to engage in regional convenings, our statewide literacy conferences, things like that, to deepen their knowledge will, in hope, turn practices and more deeply embed the foundational literacy standards that have been implemented.
Thank you. And how do we know this other pathway is as effective as the exam pathway?
Another great question. In terms of the content that's offered through the training, it's deeply connected and focused on the use of high-quality instructional materials and a sounds-first reading approach in the early grades. And so the training seems to be an area where some of our test takers that are only accessing the test alone are missing some understanding pivotal to foundational literacy skills and implementation. And so you know, we've heard and received feedback around the value of the training. Although it's an online module, it's highly engaging, and we've gotten some really great teacher feedback around the content that is in the training and the research backing around the science of reading and the sounds first literacy approach. And so the training is very helpful to cover perhaps some of the gaps in knowledge and awareness and understanding that we might be seeing in some of the assessment alone statistics.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Ms. McIntyre.
To possibly answer some of your questions, it's a very rigorous test. I mean, it's very difficult. When I took it, I was still teaching first grade, and I was in it every single day, but there are teachers that, 4th, 5th grade teachers that just don't teach literacy. So it was, you know, it's pretty difficult. So they really have to study for it, but I think it's very beneficial.
Thank you. Very helpful. Yes, Ms. Maxwell.
Dr. Wall, do you think it would be foreseeable in the future that our EPPs embed some of this training? I know their coursework is very packed as it is, but if we embedded some of this in like our high school social studies and science and mathematics courses and majors that our students, pre-service teachers major in, if we embed some components there, would you foresee this helping for our pre-service teachers?
That's a wonderful question to take under consideration and work with our ed prep providers and our support team at the department to consider. I think that that's a wonderful suggestion worth exploring. Thank you for that.
Other questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is educator vacancy reports. Ms. Brooke Amos.
Good morning, everyone. Brooke Amos, Assistant Commissioner for Human Capital. I'm here to share about our annual teacher vacancy data, as we are asked annually to share about our educator workforce shortages. This data can inform state policy decisions as well as advanced planning for districts and education preparation providers. I'll share a few highlights from this report, and then I'm happy to take any questions that you all may have. Our report highlights data from the 23-24 school year. District vacancy data is self-reported data. Data shared on emergency credentials is reported by the department. Districts reported a total of 1,434 vacancies, with an average of approximately 10 vacancies per district. The statewide vacancy rate for 23-24 was just under 2%. English as a second language, world languages, special education, and pre-K were identified as critical shortage areas, based on the proportion of vacancies to overall positions in the state being over 2.5%. In addition to the over 1,400 vacancies, there were just over 5,000 individuals on permits and 946 endorsement exemptions, commonly called waivers, issued. This represents about 10% of the total teaching positions in the state for which vacancy data reporting is required. 63 of our districts reported 0 vacancies, and 11 districts had 0 emergency credentials issued. Happy to take any questions that you all may have.
Questions for Ms. Amos? I've got a couple of questions. First, this excellent report. Trends over time are a little startling, particularly the numbers on endorsements, exemptions, and permits. So, you know, the way I read the report, our numbers are low for vacancies because we are up in exemptions and permits. Are we doing anything to address that in the future?
Yes, sir, that's exactly right. We've seen relatively stable numbers of vacancies, those within the 1,000, 1,400 range, but we are seeing the number of waivers, endorsement exemptions, those have increased by about threefold, and the numbers of permits have increased by about 150% over the last 3 years. I will say, in conversation with our district leaders, they are saying that what they're really focusing on right now is how they're able to support those individuals coming in on permits and what that pathway looks like. One of the things we are thankful for is the work that we have done with the board to create a pathway to licensure for those individuals coming in on permits. So individuals who come in on a permit, after they are on that permit for 2 or 3 years, are able to transition to a limited license, given their effectiveness, and then move on to a permanent licensure pathway. So that's one of the pieces. Another piece we've been talking about, we had a meeting last week with our directors of schools who are focused on educator pipelines, is what support looks like for those individuals who are on those emergency credentials. And then some of the data from our research partner, Tara, does say, and this follows national trends, as does the uptick in emergency credentials, is that the individuals are less effective in year 1, as folks might anticipate, but that by years 2 and 3, their performance is looking on track with other individuals in the profession.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Cobbins.
Just one question on the point you just made relative to the permits. So we, at least in Memphis, Shelby County, have had a big issue with folks on permits getting to the end of their 3 years and not having completed their requirements. And we've had hundreds of people just vanish from the teaching population. Is there anything that governs what a district has to do along the way to, and I know it's a personal responsibility thing, of course, but from the district perspective, is there anything that governs any requirements for the district to sort of prod or hold those folks accountable during that period where you don't get to the end of the 3 years and you just have this attrition year after year after year, and these vacancies remain
high?
Yes, that's a great question. So I think we have a twofold issue there. One is that we do find that individuals on permits, especially in year one, do have higher attrition than other individuals in the workforce. I think one of the things that we are cognizant of is that it is a local decision at that point whether the individual is paired with a mentor, and we also know that individuals paired with a mentor have a greater likelihood of retention. So I think that's something that we are aware of and are also trying to communicate, while also recognizing that we're ensuring that there are enough qualified mentors for the individuals who are required statutorily to have one. So that's one. Two is that we also know that the timeline of individuals staying in profession, that up until year 5, we're seeing the greatest attrition just in general. So if we can get folks into years 3 to 5, that's a key area. If individuals are in years 2 or 3, that's when that transition to the limited license happens. They do have to have those higher LOE scores of 4 or 5, but that's something they can work with our department. We have regional licensure consultants for each of our grand divisions, and they can connect with them, and we'll make sure that those folks are aware of what that transitional piece looks like for those folks, and then they would have to do some completion of EPP at that point. But that's sort of the trajectory for those folks. So we're kind of combating a few different headwinds at that piece, but really if we can keep folks in those first few years, their efficacy improves, and so do their retention outcomes.
Further questions? Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. McIntyre, but it's...
This might be a Taylor question later, but on the flip side of permits and like emergency endorsements, I want to make sure that the traditional teacher that's wanting endorsements has just as an easier pathway to get to those endorsements. So right now, so a teacher that has a 6th through 12th grade endorsement that has a license already can do assessment only for basically any content 6 through 12. But a K through 6 teacher, even a 6th grade social studies teacher, cannot teach 8th grade social studies without doing coursework and a test. And that's thousands of dollars. So I'm trying to figure out a way to make it easier. We've got 6,000 emergency credentials being used, but you've got actual licensed teachers that aren't getting credentials because of the expense.
Yes, and I'm going to look to Taylor. She's going to tell me if I've said anything wrong at this point. Why don't you just come over here? But yeah, so that's where we do have the endorsement exemption allowability, and then we're fixing it on policy. Yes, she's giving you the nod. That's going to be fixed on policy, and then in endorsement, and then in our departmental guidance.
Okay, so it's still an emergency exemption, or is it an actual traditional way of?
So it's both. So one will be, it is allowable through waiver process currently, and then we are bringing a policy change today. Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Johnson.
When we were at Day in the District, the director of schools questioned, he said he was under the understanding that a teacher could teach one subject out of their content area, but only for 2 courses. And he didn't understand why, well, if that person can teach 2 courses, why could they not teach 4 courses, even if it was just one content area outside of their endorsement?
Okay, I am going to let Taylor answer this one, and she will introduce herself.
It was causing them more difficulty in having teachers cover classes.
Good morning, Taylor Reed, Senior Director of Licensure. Yes, so this is department guidance that is created from what is written in rule, and then also defers to policy. So I'm actually bringing, the few items that I am bringing today would address these, but we must effectuate policy first before we can change the department guidance, because the department guidance has to defer to the policy. And so there are certain things that are in policy that we are bringing before you all to vote to put the decision point back with the department. And both of these items are one of those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Amos. Next item is the 2024 Master Plan Report. Allie Reed.
Good morning, Allie Reed, Director of Engagement and Accountability for the State Board. I'm presenting the 2024 Master Plan Annual Report. This report is designed to publicly display progress towards, annual progress towards the goals set in the State Board's Master Plan. And within the report, you will see outcomes from the 2024 year, as well as actions of the board and the work ahead in each of our 4 strategic focus areas, which includes literacy, post-secondary and career, teachers and leaders, and engagement and accountability. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Ms. Reed? I have one comment. First, outstanding report. Obviously, we didn't meet all of our goals this year. Some of those goals tie with working closely with the Department of Education, and I think it would be very helpful with the department if we could get together sometime and just look to see how we can align our goals with what your strategic plan is. I think that's important. I think they're pretty well aligned, but I think that we ought to look there and see what we can do to obviously meet the goals that we have. Is there anything we ought to be doing differently? Is there anything that the department needs to do differently as we try to, meet the overall goals for the students? So I think that would be helpful if we could have a meeting like this. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Reed. That finishes our reports. Next item are the automatic teacher licensure. Mr. Todd Madison and Alex.
Good morning. Todd Madison, Ryan Shanahan, Associate Counsels for the Board. We'll be presenting first off the automatic licensure actions. State law board rule require the automatic permanent revocation of an educator's license for certain criminal offenses and classifications set forth in law. These individuals have either been convicted of one of the specified criminal offenses or their conduct meets the classification as determined by DCS. As such, we recommend the approval of these automatic actions.
Is that it?
Yes, sir, for the automatic.
So we have a recommendation. Is there a motion then to accept these licensure actions as recommended to us?
So moved.
Mr. Mullenhour moves. Mr. Jensen seconds. This does require a roll call vote. Are there any questions for Mr. Madison before we start? All right, Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Albertson.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen. Ms. Johnson. Ms. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item are teacher licensure discipline actions. We usually deal with these en masse on our consent agenda. On this agenda, it isn't listed that way, so I'm going to ask first board members if they have any of these cases they would like to pull out separately. And following that, then I would ask unanimous consent to consider the remaining items. I do know that we need to take up item D. Helen Campbell up separately to accommodate her request to address the board, which we will do. Does any other members have any requests that they would like to do differently?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to remind you
Ms.
of
Maxwell?
item Q.
Pardon?
Item Q.
Item Q. So we'll pull item Q, which is Brenda Smith, out separately. Any other items to pull out separately? If not, then pursuant to action 3.1 of our board meeting policy, I ask unanimous consent to place all teacher licensure discipline actions except items D and Q on a consent agenda. Is there any objection? Hearing none, and they are considered the teacher licensure discipline consent agenda. We'll now hear from our legal staff, and I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Mullenhour seconds. Any comments from our legal staff? No comments. If none of those, then all except for items D and Q for supporting the recommendations signify by saying, or this is a roll call vote, right? Yes, roll call vote.
Mr. Cobbin.
Aye.
Ms. Albertson.
Aye.
Mr. Holt. Mr. Jensen. Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Motion passes. Next then, we'll take up the two items separately. D. Helen Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. P. Danielle Nellis, Deputy General Counsel for the board. We have Ms. Helen Campbell before you all today. Ms. Campbell is here present with us. You can come forward at this time. Ms. Campbell is requested to speak before you and followed all the proper procedures, and Mr. Chair, you granted her permission to do so. Per our procedure, she would be allowed for 3 minutes. Let me frame the case briefly for you all. She is requesting restoration of her license. This board revoked her license in February of 2023. Revocations generally stand for a 5-year period, so in a traditional sense, she would not be eligible to have her license restored until February of 2028, if my math is correct. The revocation was based on underlying conduct during the 2019-2020 school year, where Ms. Campbell and another educator dragged a child some 500 to 600 feet, is my understanding, through us, and this student was a special education student, through the school. The board did revoke her license based on that underlying conduct, as well as a violation of TCA 49.5.413 and 49.5.417. However, Ms. Campbell did submit significant amounts of information regarding the things that have happened since then, since the revocation, the actions she's both taken personally to get herself in a better place to return to the classroom. She also submitted some 18+ letters of recommendation with her packet. As such, the staff and the case review committee, which is made up of this board staff, does recommend restoration of her license.
Thank you. Ms. Campbell, would you like to address the board? You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, members of the State Board. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My teacher and administrator licenses are both currently revoked from an automatic revocation due to my pleading no contest to a child abuse charge. My record has been expunged and there is no longer a basis for my license to be revoked. As I speak to you all today, it's been 1,842 days since my arrest for this charge. The charge of child abuse was initially dismissed because there was not and there never was proof of an injury. DCS also dismissed the claim due to not meeting their threshold of what was found to be child abuse. Unfortunately, there is quite a complicated story of bad actors at the local school board where I once worked that wanted me fired, and this was their way of accomplishing this. I do realize that what I did on November 4th, 2019 was a mistake and will never touch a child again. This day is the biggest regret of my life. The events that unfolded after that day have changed me forever. Due to the trauma experienced with my arrest, treatment from the local school board and its personnel, the unimaginable cruel comments on social media, and the treatment by the DA's office, I've been through months of counseling and medical treatment.
I have worked tirelessly with my healthcare providers to find appropriate medicine to treat my trauma and sought counseling services to recover. In addition to all that occurred with my criminal charge, I was personally sued. In the midst of all this, I lost my mother to terminal cancer after being her full-time caregiver for 10 months. I settled the civil case and took a deal from the DA so I could care for my mother in her last months. I say all this to plead with the board to reinstate my licenses. I have been profoundly punished with all that has occurred. I have worked very hard to define who I am now, and I am not the same person I was back then. But I still have a great love for working with children. This calling has not changed. I want to find ways to help children in my church and community so I can honor my mother's memory. She loved caring for children and helping those in need, and fulfill what I believe is my calling in life. I am also thinking long term. There will be a day that I'm a grandmother, and I will find great joy in volunteering in my grandchildren's classroom and being an active caregiver in their lives. I don't want a revoked license to impede my ability to enjoy my role as a grandmother or a servant in the community. Between losing my mother and this discipline with events that followed, these 5 years have been the most challenging of my life. I realize that my actions have long-lasting effects on not only myself, but all those around me. I have a new understanding of how to handle difficult situations, and I want to be a role model for the next generation. I realize that my revocation was not official until February 10th, 2023, but in reality, this punishment and inability to utilize my educator license began November 8th, 2019, over 5 years ago. I implore you all to reinstate my licenses. I want to put the past behind me and focus on a bright future that allows me the opportunity to help children in need and nurture children as they grow. I'm here today to show you all that I am not only incredibly sorry and deeply regretful for my mistakes, but also worthy of your consideration to have my licenses reinstated. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. We have a recommendation from the staff.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We would recommend restoration of Ms. Campbell's license.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation for restoration of the license. Does the board wish to take action?
So moved.
Mr. Mullenhour moves to reinstate the license. Is there a second? Mr. Holt seconds. Is there further discussion? Yes. Vice Chair Cobbins.
Thank you. I will support the restoration, so I'm going to start off by saying that. But a lot of what we've heard, and I empathize and sympathize with your situation and circumstances, but a lot of what we heard is about you. But on the other end of this situation is a child who was impacted by these actions, which sound extremely aggressive. And hopefully that child, through whatever means of understanding or therapy or parental consolation, can get over that probably traumatic experience that he or she had. And, you know, as a parent of a child with special needs, I want to make sure that I'm on the record of stating from the perspective of a parent and having had a child who went through something similar, not as egregious, but something similar from a person entrusted to educate them, that there's no excuse at all for that action. We all are worthy of redemption and second chances, but I place the emphasis on thinking about, hopefully, how that child can overcome that experience and be comfortable going back into a learning environment and trusting the folks who are supposed to be nurturing and educating him or her. And oftentimes with children with special needs, others interpret their actions and their behaviors through the lens of what they might interpret for a typical child. And sometimes those children are not in full control neurologically, behaviorally, and otherwise. And so if we're interpreting that child's actions, whatever they've done or not done, that is a deficit and an indication on our part that we have some growth to do and some learning to do and some needed training to better understand how to manage and deal with those types of situations. So again, over the course of time, and it sounds like you're very remorseful. It sounds like you have a number of supporters that would like to see you back in the classroom. When you do go back into the classroom, assuming an affirmative vote here, I hope that you will have that child's experience that you're dealing with or working with at the forefront of your mind. So thank you for appearing here today and sharing your side of the story. And again, hopefully you can take all those factors into account when you go back into the classroom. So,
Thank you, Mr. Cobbins.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Mullenhour.
Thank you. I made the motion mostly because I believe in the process and I believe in the work that our staff does here in investigating and evaluating and considering what can be very complicated situations like this. And they made the recommendation to restore, so I wanted to start by supporting that. I have one very simple question for you, Ms. Campbell. If you put yourself back at that moment, in this moment, what would you do differently? Just rapid fire. What would you have done differently in that situation?
I would have done everything differently. I would have called the child's mother to come pick him up from school, and I would have called for our crisis prevention team to come in and help with their de-escalation, and not taking matters into my own hands. And I know that that was a mistake, and am incredibly regretful of it. And I have every day to think about that now. And I do think about it every day and how to do things very differently as a mother, as a wife, as hopefully an educator again. I messed up big time, and I get that. And I understand that there have been lasting consequences to that. So I would do everything very, very differently.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. I intend to support it. However, like Vice Chairman Cobbins, we have 20 plus people on this list today. And this is the one part of what we do that is very difficult. You're dealing with people's lives and their livelihood, but as Vice Chairman Cobbins said, we're also thinking about children first and foremost. And I trust our staff, our legal staff, for their recommendation. But I just want to underscore that this is an issue that we shouldn't have 20 people on this list today. And I regret that's the case, but it is a fact of life. And I just want us to make sure we're clear in our communications with folks who get on this list that this is a very serious matter. And I appreciate you being here today and stating this, but I want to communicate beyond the four walls of this room that this is a very, very serious matter to be in front of this board and ask for a reprieve or restitution or whatever. And I hope we're not setting a precedent that says, you know, you just go and make a case and they'll reinstate you, because but I think the staff recommendation, they've looked into it, I know deeply, and I defer to that recommendation and appreciate y'all's work to deal with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
One last comment.
Yes, Mr. Cobbins.
Yes, just one last comment. I would really encourage you, once you're back in the classroom, to use this experience to be a mentor in situations that you might observe, and apply some wisdom to some folks who may not be fully aware or who need some guidance on what they should or shouldn't do or how to handle situations. So hopefully your experience can avert situations of a similar nature from happening in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cobbins. Any other comments? Yes.
Mr.
Maxwell.
Chairman, I would just like to go on record to say that this is truly an unfortunate situation. I appreciate the things that Mrs. Campbell has done past the incident. However, as an educator of 33 years, I also know that well before 2019, we've been trained how to handle situations, and this situation does seem to be an extreme situation, and I am having to look at the student first. So I appreciate our council's recommendation. However, I've studied this closely the last 2 weeks also, and I just wanted to explain why that I will not be voting for the restoration.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, if I may make some clarifications for the
Sure.
record here.
Yes.
We are recommending, let me backtrack. First and foremost, we thank each of you all for your feedback. Our job as your staff is to provide recommendations, but ultimately the decision does lie with each of you and your wisdom, your decision, so we appreciate your feedback. I want to clarify that the recommendation, which is written here, is restoration with stipulation. Ms. Campbell, if restored by this board, will have to take professional development in restraint training. So she will not re-enter the classroom without having the appropriate supports in that way. Also, because she is placed in the record, I will note that she has completed conditions necessary to have her criminal record expunged. That's not something that we would put forward first. That information is certainly available to you, but because she's put it in the record today, she has completed those conditions to allow for her criminal record to be expunged.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Other comments? Mr. Griffin, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Albertson.
Hi.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell.
Nay.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye. Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Campbell, we do hope you've learned from this experience and you'll take this back and be the educator we know you can be. Thank you. Next item is pulled out. Brenda Smith, item Q.
Yeah, the board's recommendation for Ms. Brenda Smith is a formal reprimand. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I asked for this to be pulled is that, given the situation, I feel that the recommendation of a formal reprimand does not rise to the level of action that was taken by this educator.
Thank you. Do we want to talk a little more about why we don't think this is the level based on the incidents?
Certainly. Speaking generally first. Oh, excuse me. Is this better at all? All right. Speaking generally, so board staff on the case review committee receives information, evaluates that information, and then makes its recommendation. Based on the information we received for this educator, the recommendation from the case review committee was the formal reprimand. We would have looked at employment history, any kind of mitigating information that the educator would provide, statement, context, anything like that, information from law enforcement, all that kind of stuff.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Holt.
So as a matter of precedent, when we have teachers who bring a loaded gun to school and leave it in a handbag in a room where they're not present anymore, I share Dr. Maxwell's concern on this. Is this something that we're saying sort of as precedent that you can do that and not have any sort of consequence to your license other than a reprimand. And is that something that we have said before, or is this kind of breaking new ground on the circumstances and the precedent that we're setting here?
Sure. I'm not sure if I can speak directly to the precedential value. Admittedly, this is not the type of thing that really happens that often. Having said that, the board is welcome and free to reject the recommendation and propose an alternative sanction that I can and will then take to the educator for consideration for either acceptance or rejection, possible move on to a hearing.
And
Yes, Mr. Holt, go ahead.
And what would be sort of the next level or two up above historically of a formal reprimand?
Sure. So that would be suspension or revocation. Kind of a subsection or subset under suspension could be a retroactive suspension, which would not take the educator out of the classroom, but would be on their record.
And do I understand correctly that this educator is already out of the classroom anyways?
She was non-renewed, but I think, from what I was able to see, I think she may be staffed at another school now.
And do you recall, I'm sorry, I'm looking through the papers for it, when the incident occurred? So if we were to do a retroactive, some sort of retroactive consequence, whether that would result in the teacher being suspended? Like what do you know when the incident occurred?
Looks like the incident occurred on March 28th of 24.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Thank you, gentlemen. Just a couple quick questions. I just want to highlight and ask you to confirm my understanding of the facts here. Ms. Smith, in this case, she has a handgun carry permit, which, depending on when she obtained that, would have at least meant that she underwent a background check. It may have also included some training, again, kind of depending on when she might have obtained that handgun carry permit. Your file indicates that handgun carry permit is valid, correct?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
That was some information I think she submitted to the school district.
Okay. My understanding is that when confronted with this issue, she did not object to it, she didn't resist it. It appeared to have been, I'll call it an honest mistake, in that she peacefully cooperated with everyone who investigated the matter. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, she submitted a letter expressing apology for the incident.
Okay. And then from a procedural standpoint, my understanding is that the particular infraction here requires the board to take some action. In other words, we can't take no action. Is that correct?
I think it's within your discretion to whether to take action. It certainly is grounds that rises to actionable conduct, but there's no requirement that action be taken.
Okay. So the floor, to kind of use that as a way to sort of describe the range, the floor is we can do nothing up to a maximum of something, and what you have recommended is somewhere in between. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And what I'll build on to answer your question, Mr. Holt, about setting a precedent, each one of these cases is looked at on a case-by-case basis. So while we do provide, historical context for a lot of these recommendations, it doesn't tie the board to that particular recommendation. So you are welcome to go outside of those cases that we've had similar previously, just because everything is evaluated case by case. So there are, unique factors of each case, mitigating and non-mitigating. So just wanted to clarify that if you were to vote for the formal reprimand today, it's not essentially tying your hands for future cases to go outside of that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Just a second. Danielle.
Thank you. So in Ms. Smith's case, thank you all for your comments. There was no conviction. Generally, guns are prohibited on school property. There's an interplay between both state and federal law in regards to who can and cannot have firearms on school property. In this situation, Ms. Smith was charged under the state statutes. However, after review by local authorities, her case was dismissed. She does have a carry permit. It's unclear to us whether that is an enhanced permit or the regular permit. We would need to dig into that a little deeper. That matters because when you're dealing with gun-free school zones, there is a carve-out regarding the enhanced permits versus just the regular carry permit. I give all of that background because we have brought this case to you all on a theory of negligence. That is that she did not act in a reasonable manner. There was a potential for harm. So we are not moving forward based on any criminal convictions, charges, or actions, but based on the fact that she did have that loaded weapon in the faculty's bathroom. We did consider that the risk of harm was significantly low in this situation and the remorse as has been outlined by my colleagues here. So I do want to make sure we're clarifying that for the record. This is one of the very few weapons cases that we have brought before this board. And to my understanding, the prior cases have dealt with weapons that have been generally on school property, but not as clear that it was within the school building. So it may have been in a parking lot or somewhere else, which is distinct certainly from bringing it into the school. But I do want to make that clear for this board that we are moving forward on this theory of negligence or other good cause, and as it's listed in our rule.
Thank you, Ms. Nellis. Mr. Mullenhour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two questions. One, my understanding is that the purse was found in a faculty area. It was not found in a classroom, as an example. Would you consider there to be a distinction in terms of the negligence theory in this case? Would you consider there to be a distinction between finding a purse in, for example, a faculty classroom versus a kids classroom, or a faculty lounge versus a kids classroom?
Every inquiry that we do is fact intensive, and I think generally speaking, I believe we would consider the location of the weapon and its ability to be accessed by students as we're making that determination. Okay, thank you. And then the second question is, if we assume for a second that this is an enhanced carry permit, which involves additional training and scrutiny, would you find that to also be a distinction in sort of considering a negligence cause here? Let me kind of speak a little more generally and not to that specific statute. When we have situations that implicate criminal charges, we understand that criminal charges, if somebody is to be convicted, carry a significantly higher burden beyond a reasonable doubt. That does not prohibit us from looking at the underlying conduct in our rule where our burden of proof is lower. And so even if she is not convicted, or even if someone was, we could still consider that underlying conduct under our rule under a lower burden of proof. And we see that in several cases outside of the criminal context as well.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not questioning the burden of proof as much as I'm just trying to understand if the staff's concern, if the staff's recommendation is based on a negligence theory in this particular case, if a person, in order to receive, for example, an enhanced gun carry permit, has to reach a higher bar, more background checks or more training, et cetera, my assumption is that that person's actions would be viewed as less negligent just because of the training and background checks and et cetera, as compared to someone, for example, who either has no handgun carry permit at all or has the handgun carry permit that's not enhanced. Would you agree?
I think I can comfortably say yes, we would consider that as a factor when looking at the cases.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being so informed on this as well. It's great to be able to just ask questions and get great answers.
Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have two questions, I guess, two different people. So, Dr. Maxwell, I have deference for you and your experience, and so do you have a recommendation on what you would do? And you can maybe think that through, or what you recommend for us to do. You can think that through for my next question. So, Daniel, I don't know if you're equipped for this one or not, but let's say if a parent had done this, how would we have done that? How would that have been handled? Obviously, it wouldn't have come to us, but, and then also a student had done this. What I worry about is bringing a gun on campus is a very big deal. And so I don't want us to lower that expectation in any way. And I am someone who pretty much conceals every day at my office. And so I understand how mistakes can be made when you're used to doing something like that. But bringing a gun on campus is a very, very serious deal. So I'm kind of struggling with both of those two things.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, is how should we view those three stakeholder groups? So first and foremost, we only have authority over teacher licenses. So we're looking at disciplining the teacher's license and the conduct that would call their license into question or require for it to be disciplined. The statutes, as I understand them, discuss non-adult or non-student adults is how they phrase it in the statute about who can or cannot have weapons on campus. And so those carve-outs are really specific in the state statute, and forgive me for not having it up in front of me. But there are certain situations in which a non-student adult can have a weapon on campus. It is, off the top of my head, there are exceptions for having an unloaded weapon, going through to hunting grounds, having permission to hunt, and different things like that. And we can certainly circulate that information to you and the board once we conclude here. And then there is an interplay with the federal law, of course. And so if a parent were to bring it on campus, but the law enforcement would look at it through the lens of those statutes. If a student brought it on campus, similarly, there are statutes that dictate the behavior of students and what is and is not allowed to be on campus. And so, as Dr. Maxwell has pointed out, certainly the penalty is significantly greater for a student bringing a weapon on campus. But our rule, in line with the criminal statute that's been carved out, recognizes there is a distinction between an adult who has a weapon on campus and a child who may have a weapon on campus. There are, in our rules, specific reference to giving juveniles handguns. And so going back to Mr. Mollenhauer's question, if for some reason an adult were to supply a weapon to a juvenile, there would be significant criminal penalty and there would be revocation under our rule of their license.
I have a question. A teacher, we now allow teachers to bring guns on the school. Are they required to notify, or do they typically notify the principal, someone on the staff, that they have a gun?
I am actually going to defer to Mr. James, who has extraordinary familiarity with that statute, but I do want to say that the board does not participate in the permission given related to educators who are able to be on campus with weapons. My understanding is under that statute, there are many, many safeguards put in place, including communication between multiple local stakeholders and training in order for an educator to have a weapon. And no, you're fine. I was going to say, see if there's anything else Mr. James wanted to add to that besides the very stringent requirements that were put into the statute.
I think our general counsel wants to say something.
Yeah, I'm happy for that.
Thank you, and I'll defer to Mr. James as well. Rachel Supay, General Counsel for the State Board. I appreciate all these really great questions and certainly understand and take seriously the issue here. As my team has presented, this raises a lot of really in the weeds regulations at the state, federal, and sometimes even local level that we have to consider on a case-by-case basis for each one of these handgun-related cases. And what I would like to offer to the board is if there's any additional clarification or further discussions that we should be having to discuss these recent changes that have been made on a lot of these gun laws, I'm happy to kind of provide any additional context. We can discuss it at a workshop presentation if that would be helpful. However, we can best get that information to you so that it's clear what the rules are as applied to students versus parents versus teachers, But it is pretty in the weeds, as my team has conveyed, I hope. So I want to continue the conversation, and I'll defer it to Mr. James for anything else.
Mr. James?
Mr. Chairman, there's obviously there was a lot of attention paid to recent statutory changes, which would authorize a superintendent of schools to, in conjunction and after extensive training, to allow a teacher to carry a weapon. If that teacher asked to do so, the principal endorsed it, the superintendent requested it, and the sheriff or the chief law enforcement officer approved it after extensive training. So that's very, very much a different sort of circumstance than what you have here. But if you watch the news on it, you wouldn't get all of those details in. So I would suggest that, you know, even if it was a 20-minute conversation we had at our next workshop, it might be good to have a detailed kind of, you know, 101 on that statute.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously there's some training that the districts need to be sure that they do. But I think under this case, correct me if I'm wrong, but this teacher had not notified the front office that they were carrying a gun. Is that correct?
That is correct. And to be very clear, this case before this board does not in any way implicate the recent changes by the legislature in the statute involving educators carrying weapons. She, in her statements, indicated that she forgot it from the evening before and expressed her great remorse for having left it in her purse.
And fortunately, she left it in a teacher lounge. But if she had left that purse in a classroom and had forgotten it, and a student had happened to get a hold of it, so the fact that it's in the teacher's lounge to me doesn't make any really difference. The fact that it was on school property was not, the school system had not been notified that she was carrying on school property. That gives me a lot of concern.
Certainly.
Yes, Ms. Maxwell.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can reframe maybe my concern here. So I do feel like she's very remorseful. I think it was an accident that she forgot that. And I appreciate all of my fellow board members' comments about this. I think because she had a gun carrying permit, it calls into question, though, when you go through all of that training, you know that you are responsible for that weapon 24/7. You know, so that's why that I feel that a formal reprimand is just does not rise to the level. And I also want to add, I was taught from a very young age to respect firearms. Those are stories for other times, very positive stories. But it's just that I think that the level of action needs to be a little more than a formal reprimand, possibly, you know, some type of suspension, a retroactive suspension. I don't think this was intentional, but it could have also, unintentional things often turn into very bad situations. So I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you, Dr. Maxwell. And this body is always welcome to reject any recommendations that are made, as you all have the final say.
And a board member can represent a suspension, recommend a suspension if they so desire. So, yes, Ms. Johnson.
Just a quick question. Did the fact that she did not receive criminal charges have anything to play into the decision that is recommended? And why was she found not guilty of criminal charges? Or am I asking too much?
My understanding is the charges didn't go forward; they were dismissed. So she was never there. There was no conviction at all related to the contract.
So she was never charged.
She was charged and she was arrested, and then the case was eventually dismissed. In reviewing, I don't remember seeing any narrative around why it was dismissed, and that often doesn't come with court documents. I will say that we consider all factors related to a case when reviewing them and making the recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Holt.
I have a clarifying question. I should have done this beforehand. I'm looking at it in real time right now. Section 39-17-1309 of the Tennessee Code, which is the criminal offense section for possession of firearms on school property. And it's not the simplest code section, and I don't want to step beyond my lane here to do my own legal analysis right now. But I'm not seeing in here having any type of permit being a defense to having a loaded weapon on a school campus outside of in a person's vehicle.
That is correct.
Whether enhanced or not. And so I guess there's a question of, you know, whether a prosecutor decides this is worth prosecuting someone to try to send them to prison for a Class E felony for up to 6 years versus the obligations that we have to ensure that there are educators that we feel comfortable with in classrooms and on school campuses. So I see those two things as a different analysis of, should this person be locked up for some extended amount of time, or should we impose some sort of consequence beyond a formal reprimand on bringing a weapon onto school property?
So I want to be very clear that the state statute does not make that distinction, but there is a federal statute that does make that distinction. And then the state statute does refer to the portion that outlines what would be required for an enhanced gun carry permit, and I forget exactly the interplay there, but I believe you are correct, and as I said earlier, because the way we view it is because the burdens are different, we are not prohibited from taking action even when there is not criminal, when there are not criminal charges. And so we do believe we're still able to take action. I will note that the state criminal statute, as far as the delineation between the conviction class, it is an E felony only if that person has the intent to go armed, whereas simply carrying and possessing it would have been a B misdemeanor.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take this opportunity to, I guess, respond. Mr. Holt, I agree that it doesn't have a technical application in this case. The reason I was trying to sort of highlight that was that, as I understand, the staff's recommendation is based on a theory of negligence, and that brings into question, I think, to what extent does the person's competency and understanding what they're doing create a dangerous situation? And I would suggest that if someone is totally unfamiliar with firearms, if they have a criminal record, if they kind of create a list of a lot of things, if that were the case here, then in my mind, negligence is like, it really supports at minimum, I think, a claim of negligence. If, on the other hand, it's someone who has undergone training, if they've had a background check, they don't have a criminal record, et cetera, all, the things that would be required for them to have a handgun carry permit under current law, then in my mind, it would, certainly a mistake was made, but to what extent, how heavy is that weight on the scale? And I think someone who has that background, who has that training, and who's more aware, to your point, it doesn't make it okay, but it would suggest that the negligence is less likely to lead to bad outcomes because they're just, they do have training and they do have familiarity, et cetera. That was the thinking.
So I think we have a couple of options here. We could go ahead and we could vote on the recommendation. We could alter the recommendation, or we could ask our attorney to go back and relook at the situation. Personally, I have real heartburn with just giving a reprimand for anybody bringing a gun to school unknowingly, known by, by the administration. And so I guess it's up to this board. Do you want to vote on this motion? Is there a motion to amend the motion, or do we want to table the motion and ask for a recommendation from, yes, Mr. James?
Mr. Chairman, at this time, there's been no motion to approve the staff recommendation.
We don't have a motion on that.
Place of awaiting a motion by a member.
Thank you, Chair.
One last question for
Yes.
our staff. So if I'm understanding you correctly, Ms. Smith is currently teaching somewhere in the state of Tennessee?
That is my understanding, yes, I believe she is.
Okay, so if we do anything, if we revoke her license, for example, we would effectively be removing her from that classroom instantly.
Correct, that would remove her ability to teach in Tennessee, yes.
But the option on the table right now, Mr. Mullenhour, is not to revoke her license.
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to
Yeah,
be very
my
clear.
understanding is that what you're recommending is a reprimand, which would allow her to continue teaching, but it would formalize the fact that she made a mistake, and it would sort of put at least administrators in the state of Tennessee on notice that this had happened in the past. But it would allow her to continue teaching as she currently is. Whereas if we revoke, we're going to immediately pull her out of that classroom. Thank you.
I'm going to move that we table this to the December meeting and ask our legal counsel to look at the situation and bring back a recommendation. I'm not ready to vote on this recommendation. Certainly, I'm not ready to approve what was recommended to us. So I move to table. That closes off any discussion if somebody seconds the table. We have a second to the table. All in favor?
Second.
All in favor for tabling this to come back in December with additional information, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That brings us to the action items. We'll take a break. Oh, yes, that's right. We do have one more. We have to take action on those items that were not pulled. We have recommendations on each one of those. Is there a motion to accept the recommendations as presented? Mr. Cobbins moves. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry?
Second.
Okay. Second by Ms. Maxwell. Any further discussion? This requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Albertson.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen. Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. McInturf.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Motion passes. Let's take a 10-minute break. It is 10:38. We'll reconvene at, we'll say 10:50. 3 minutes, 3 minutes. Let's reconvene. We're ready to go to items on first reading. First item is educator licensure policy. Can we please have a quiet? Yeah, we're ready to go. I know we all want to get out of here if we can. Items on first reading, educator licensure policy, Ms. Taylor Reed.
Good morning, Taylor Reed, Senior Director of Licensure for the department. Tennessee State Board of Education Educator Licensure Policy 5.502 outlines general licensure requirements, including application and duration of licenses, professional development points, and endorsements. This item revises the validity period for professional level licenses from no more than 7 years to no more than 11 years to align with recently passed changes to the Educator Licensure Rule 0520-02-03 in accordance with Chapter 1005 of the Public Acts of 2024. This item establishes 2 new endorsements: Provisional Integrated Early Childhood Education Birth through K and Provisional Integrated Early Childhood Education Pre-K through 3, which will allow out-of-state educators and current Tennessee educators who have not yet obtained these endorsements to teach in a special education classroom for up to 3 years while working towards completing requirements for the continuously renewable version of the endorsement. This item also adds an option for educators to obtain additional endorsements through coursework-only requirements, removes specific grade bands from allowable district flexibilities, and allows the department to determine applicable endorsements and flexibilities. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first reading. The SBE staff concurs with this recommendation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. We have a recommendation from the department. Is there a motion? Yeah, well, we got to get a motion on the table. So get it on the table, then we can officially discuss it. All right. Ms. McIntyre moves. Is there a second? Dr. Maxwell, I think Ms. Maxwell, Dr. Maxwell seconded. Okay, now you can ask your question.
Sorry, I may have jumped the gun earlier, but do you have any idea of what will be assessment only? Because according to the document right now, and I know you have to wait for us to approve the policy change, so can you kind of talk to us about that?
Yes, so at the request, we have been working with program teams to expand those options. However, I believe the better way to answer your question would be there are areas where it would not be applicable, such as special education, unless the educator holds a special education endorsement on their current license. And that is just to align with federal prohibitions. So an example, like you mentioned earlier, that a K-6 teacher could not add middle grades, that flexibility would occur with these changes. However, we are in the process and on track to complete that guidance much before the timeline of me bringing this on final reading before you all in February. However, we should not publish that guidance because we would not be able to operationalize it currently. And so there will be a lot of expanded areas. However, there will be some areas where it would not be developmentally appropriate, and a lot of those aligned with special education, notably.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Other question? Yes, Ms. Maxwell.
Just to clarify, so if you had an educator that had a 4 through 8 ELA license, they would be permitted to take the assessment to gain high school licensure?
Yes, so this item actually would allow 3 pathways. There would be an assessment-only pathway for applicable endorsements. There would be a coursework-only pathway for applicable endorsements. And there would also be a coursework and assessment option if one of the 2 prior pathways would not be available. In the situation that you're speaking about, we do anticipate that, yes, a 4 through 8 middle grades teacher, even though those are retired endorsements, of course they can still teach if the license remains active, they would be able to choose either the coursework only or assessment only pathways to obtain certification in those areas if they don't hold a major in the content area, and at which point they'd be able to add the endorsement anyway.
Any other questions? We have a motion and a second on first reading for Educator Licensure Policy 5.502. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Reed. Next item is Career and Technical Education Course Standards. Ms. Deborah Knoll.
Good morning, Deborah Knoll, Assistant Commissioner of College, Career, and Technical Education, presenting on first reading for the Career and Technical Education Course Standards. TCA 49-1-302A8 authorizes the State Board of Education to approve all academic standards and adopt rules and policies governing courses of study in the public schools. Additionally, State Board rule calls for the State Board to adopt standards for each subject area. Grades K through 12. The Standards Review Policy 3.09 requires the Department of Education to review the career and technical course standards at a minimum of every 3 years. The approved standards are to be the basis for planning instructional programs in each local school system. This item includes revised course standards for the following CTE career clusters, which is the education and training. The 2 courses that are listed there are Early Childhood Education Careers 1 and Early Childhood Education Careers 4. It also includes new courses within the following CTE clusters, which is a brand new one. It's our Energy and Sustainable Resources, which is a new career cluster. I do want to note that this was done in really strong collaboration with the governor's newly appointed Tennessee Nuclear Energy Advisory Council. So we did really collaborate with that council, those members, and we also collaborated with some post-secondary and some secondary teachers in creating this. In your supplementary packet, I believe there is a letter of support that we did provide as well from that council. The 4 courses are Foundations of Energy, Fundamentals of Clean Energy, Fundamentals of Nuclear Energy, and an Energy Practicum. Another new career cluster was our Marketing and Research Analytics, and we've got 3 courses within that. We have the Marketing Research Analytics 1, 2, and also a practicum course. The high school CT courses have been created and updated based on the revised framework of the CTE career clusters and with educational feedback that align more closely with industry and post-secondary needs. Industry partners, secondary, and post-secondary educators have all reviewed these new and revised standards. Additional feedback will be solicited between the first and final reading. And the recommendation right now is the Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first reading, and the State Board of Education staff concurs with this recommendation. Happy to take any questions.
We have a recommendation on first reading. Is there a motion to accept the recommendation? Vice Chair Cobbins moves.
Second.
Mr. Jensen seconds. Questions, comments? I would say that I'm delighted to see the one on energy, in particular in nuclear energy, being from Oak Ridge. You know, I think this is in line with the efforts of the governor to make Tennessee the energy state of the country, the nuclear energy state of the country. So glad to see that one come through. Other comments or questions? If none, we have a recommendation, motion and a second for career and technical education course standards. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Knoll. Next item, fine arts academic standards, Ms. Christy Wall.
Good morning again, Christy Wall, Department of Education, Assistant Commissioner for Academics, bringing on first reading Fine Arts Academic Standards. TCA 491302A8 authorizes the State Board of Education to approve all academic standards and adopt rules and policies governing courses of study in public schools. Additionally, State Board Rule 0520-01-03-.03 Subsection 1 calls for the State Board to adopt standards for each subject area, grades K-12. The approved standards are to be the basis of planning instructional programs in each local school system. State Board Standards Review Policy 3.209 requires the State Board to review all sets of academic standards at a minimum of every 8 years. The Department of Education conducts stakeholder outreach during the 23-24 school year to recruit subject matter experts from the following disciplines within fine arts: dance, theater, media art, visual arts, general music, instrumental music, vocal music, and music theory. These subject matter experts convened in March of 2024 to recommend the revisions to the fine arts standards. The subject matter experts included representation from elementary through high school educators, district instructional supervisors, and adjunct professors. Districts also submitted input to guide these recommendations and best practices from professional organizations that were utilized throughout the revision process. This item includes revisions to the current standard document and guidance on K-12 fine arts standards, and the changes in summary include a revised introduction to align with proposed revision throughout the standards, revisions to language across all disciplines to increase clarity and precision, clearer differentiation between grade levels for some standards, inclusion of standards for a 4th high school course in visual and media arts for congruency with other fine arts disciplines, inclusion of enduring understandings and essential understandings in theater and dance, again for congruence with other fine arts subjects, removal of some very specific examples to provide more flexibility in instruction. The department will solicit additional feedback and public stakeholder input between the first and final reading of this item. Pursuant to TCA 49-1-309, the State Board will submit the proposed changes to the education committees to the House and Senate prior to the final reading. These standards changes are anticipated to go into effect during the 2028-2029 school year. With that, the Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first reading, and the State Board staff concurs with the recommendation. I'm happy to take any questions.
We have a recommendation for fine arts academic standards. Is there a motion to accept that recommendation? Mr. Wells moves. Is there a second? Vice Chair Cobbin seconds. Questions? Yes, Mr. Jensen.
Would you help me understand why this doesn't take, or sounds like some of it takes effect immediately, but then it says 28, 29 school year? I just need clarification on that.
Yes, sir. So the review started earlier in 2024. By the time that this item comes for first reading and then final reading, we want to ensure that updated standards and guidance are in place and ready for rollout to districts and implementation as it falls in line with the review of required standards revisions. These items are actually overdue for standard revision and implementation. And so the recommendation is to give a bit of prolonged time simply because this item is coming to you all on first reading during the midpoint of the academic year for this particular year.
Other questions? I was glad to see the standards change like dance, which provide more flexibility to the teachers. Very positive. We have a motion and a second to accept on first reading fine arts academic standards. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Wall. Next item, individualized education accounts rule 052011-02, 03, 04, 06, 08, and 10. Ms. Farrah Williams.
Good morning. I know you've all heard it at least twice already, but as a lifelong resident of this area, welcome to West Tennessee. I am Farrah Williams. I'm the Senior Director of the ESA and the IEA programs. TCA 491014 and the IEA Rule 05200111 outline the student eligibility and participation requirements of the IEA program. In order to align with the requirements for non-public schools, as well as to provide additional clarity in select program areas, this item proposes the following revisions to the IEA program rules. The reference to criminal background checks is revised to cross-reference and align with the existing approval requirements for non-public schools. The current criminal background check requirements in the rule for participating IEA schools are duplicative for interested schools and current partners. This past week, GovOps heard similar changes to the ESA rule in light of GovOps questioning about the maintaining of records around criminal background checks and our desire to ensure the safety of all students, as well as for clarity. There might be slight revisions to these rules between first and final read with the intention of the IEA rules mirroring the ESA rules. Department and state board attorneys will work together on those adjustments. Additionally, a deadline is added to the return of IEA participation agreement documentation for timely program implementation, financial accounting, and accurate enrollment. Without that signed participation agreement, IEA funds are not able to be loaded into accounts. Therefore, it is a required document to complete program enrollment. For preciseness, this item adds language to specify the minimum amount of the annual award that must be expended each contract year to avoid funds being withheld in the next contract year. This item adds additional options for financial verification to clarify requirements for schools interested in or currently participating in the IEA program. Currently, the rule states that a school must submit a surety bond to demonstrate financial viability. This item adds the option for a participating school to also submit a certified public accountant letter or federal tax return form to verify financial viability. This item also removes references to expense reports throughout the rules to align with how participating families currently report expended funds. Each account holder may report expenses throughout the quarter and upload supporting receipts. These are reviewed on a rolling basis, and reviews are completed prior to the next quarterly disbursement of funds. Therefore, any reference to a one-time quarterly expense report is not applicable to the current program implementation. Finally, the language around the appeals process is edited to clarify the overall process and deadlines. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first read. The SBE staff concurs with this recommendation. Does anyone have any questions?
We have a recommendation for individualized education accounts rule 5052001110203040608 and 10. Is there a motion to accept this? Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second?
Second with a comment.
Mr. Mullenhour seconds, and Ms. Mulliner, you have the floor.
Thank you. Just a quick question. What stakeholders do you intend to engage between now and final reading?
Most of this work, to my understanding, will be among our department and state board attorneys to make sure that we are clarifying everything that is questioned about any of that maintenance of records.
Okay. I guess the yellow flag, not a red flag, just a yellow flag would be making sure that the people that represent some of the, for example, the participating school, what are referred to as participating schools, just making sure that we understand the burden that, for example, getting a surety bond might place on them, and whether or not there's other ways to accomplish the objective, but without adding more layers of paperwork, financial burden, record checking, et cetera, et cetera. Would you mind just following up with me between now and second reading on how we're at least getting somebody else's eyes on this and getting their sort of boots on the ground perspective?
Absolutely. And just to clarify, the rule as currently written is the one that requires the surety bond. The changes or the edits that we're suggesting would allow 2 additional ways for schools to demonstrate that financial viability. So they could have a statement from their CPA, or they could submit their tax information without having to go to the expense of that surety bond.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so and I was just kind of skimming that section again with some notes, and thank you for that clarification. I guess to extend the question further, this describes these as minimum requirements, which means that there's any number of other requirements that could be imposed at a later time to include, things that might very well be viewed as burdensome. So again, if we could just get their eyes on it, I just want to make sure that we are getting sort of industry perspective, if you will, on this particular issue.
Understood. We can do that. We have an advisory council that could actually help with that.
Okay. Yeah, if you could just, let's talk after the meeting then.
Love
Thanks.
it.
Other questions, Mr. Cobbins?
Just want a clarification on the removal of the criminal background check.
So when the rules were written many years ago for the IEA program, the rules around criminal background checks were not called out explicitly in that non-public rule. That non-public rule has gone through significant revisions since then, so we are only aligning what we are requiring our participating non-public schools to submit or to maintain, aligning that to that rule that the non-public schools already has in place. We don't want to be duplicative or put any other burdens on our schools.
Other questions? We have a recommendation and a motion for first reading on individualized education accounts rule. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, graduation substitution policy. Ms. Christy Wall, Ms. Robin Ye.
Good morning again. Christy Wall, Assistant Commissioner of Academics, Tennessee Department of Education, bringing to you on first reading Graduation Substitution Policy 3.103. The State Board's Graduation Substitution Policy 3.103 outlines allowable course substitutions for graduation requirement credits. This item proposes clarifying the allowability of using a course substitution to satisfy one graduation requirement and elective focus requirement. The Department and State Board of Education have provided longstanding guidance
to LEAs that students may use a course substitution to satisfy one graduation requirement while also counting the course towards their elective focus. For example, a student may count a course in the graduation substitutions policy as a substitution for a required math credit and use the course to meet their elective focus, such as an AP elective focus or a CTE program of study. This item codifies this guidance in policy to provide clear expectations for LEAs. Students will still be required, to meet all other requirements of the diploma type, including the minimum number of credits. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first reading. The State Board staff concurs with the recommendation, and I'm happy to take questions on this item.
We have a recommendation on graduation substitution policy 3.103. Is there a desired action from this board? Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second? Student member, Ms. Everson seconds. Very good. You like that idea of changing graduation policy? Any questions? No questions. All in favor then for accepting graduation substitution policy 3.103 as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Wall. Next item, high school policy 2103. Mr. Michael Dearline.
Good morning. Michael Dearline, Deputy Executive Director of Policy and Research with the State Board. The high school policy builds on the academic and instructional requirements rule, setting forth instructional requirements for high school students. This item aligns with two recently adopted changes to that rule, including one related to mathematics. So removing the requirement that students take math in 4 years of high school, replacing it with the requirement that they can do so in 3 years, but still have to take 4 credits. Also changes that were made to align with requirements for EOCs, reducing the percentage by which a student EOCs count toward their grade from 15 to 25% down to 5 to 15%. With that, happy to take any questions you may have.
We have a recommendation. I'm going to move to accept that recommendation since this math thing is something that I had pushed for. So I'll make the motion to accept as recommended high school policy 2103. Is there a second? Our student member, seconds. Questions, comments? I think this continues to show how we work closely with schools and with our students and listen to our student members on providing value added as well as providing options and opportunities for our students. So I think this is very good. Any other comments or questions? No comments or questions. All in favor then for accepting high school policy 2103 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Could I make one change? Could I change and let her make the motion and I second it?
I don't know how we do that, but sure.
Mr. Chairman, you could do that by asking unanimous consent that the record reflect that.
All right, I'm going to ask for unanimous consent that Ms. Albertson makes the motion and I do the second for that.
You say without objection.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Good motion. All right, that finishes our first reading items. We now move to our final reading. First is professional assessments for Tennessee Educator Policies 5105. Ms. Taylor Reed.
Good morning again. Taylor Reed, Senior Director of Educator Licensure. Tennessee State Board of Education Professional Assessments for Tennessee Educators Policy 5.105 outlines general assessment requirements as well as pedagogical, specialty area content, and foundational literacy skills assessments. This item proposes the following revision to Section 3, Specialty Area Content Assessments. Identifies the National Evaluation Series NES 815 Educational Leadership as an option for reactivation of an instructional leader license. Clarifies the Education of Young Children Assessment Code 5024 under the Early Development and Learning Pre-K through K endorsement as an applicable assessment upon licensure renewal for job-embedded candidates, which was inadvertently left off the Early Development and Learning Pre-K through K endorsement. And adds the previously approved Special Education Foundational Knowledge Assessment Code 5355 assessment to additional special education endorsement areas to reflect changes in assessments provided by the vendor and includes corresponding acceptance dates. There have been no changes to this item since first reading. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on final reading. The SBE staff concurs with this recommendation.
We have a recommendation for professional assessments for Tennessee Educator Policies 5.105. Is there a motion to accept on final reading? Mr. Jensen moves, Vice Chair Cobbin seconds. Is there further discussion? If no further discussion, all in favor for accepting professional assessments for Tennessee Educator Policy 5.105 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Ms. Reed, Educator Licensure Rule.
Taylor Reed, Senior Director of Licensure. Tennessee State Board of Education Educator Licensure Rule 0520-02-03 outlines the license types issued in Tennessee and pathways towards licensure. Sections .03 through .08 govern the issuance of various educator licenses, and Section .10 outlines the requirements for instructional leader licenses. This item proposes revising Educator License Rule 0520-03-0 sections .03, .05, .08, and .10 to amend degree requirements for licensure issuance to include institutions with regional or national accrediting organizations recognized by the Council for Higher Education Accreditation, known as CHIA, or the United States Department of Education, USDOE. Proposed revisions would also allow an individual holding a degree from a nationally accredited institution recognized by CHIA or USDOE to be issued a license, provided all other applicable requirements have been met. Corresponding revisions were approved to the Permits Rule .12 on final reading at the State Board meeting held on August 16, 2024. State Board staff held a rulemaking hearing on October 8, 2024 to collect public feedback. Minor typographical and formatting changes were made on final reading that do not impact the substance of the rule. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading. The SBE staff concurs with this recommendation.
We have a recommendation for Educator Licensure Rule 0520-02, 03, 0.05, 0.08, and .10. Is there a motion to accept? Mr. Mullenhour? So moves. Is there a second? Mr. Wells seconds. Any discussion? This is a rule which requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Cobbins?
Aye.
Ms. Albertson?
Aye.
Mr. Holt? Aye. Mr. Jensen? Mr. Jensen?
I couldn't hear you.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell?
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre?
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour?
Aye.
Mr. Wells?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item is Educator Preparation Rule 0520-02, 04, 0.04, 0.08, and .10. Ms. Brooke Amos and Mr. Michael Derline.
Assistant Commissioner of Human Capital with the department. This item will be jointly presented with my colleague. The Tennessee State Board of Education Educator Preparation Rule 0520-02-04 outlines the educator preparation requirements in Tennessee and approval of educator preparation providers, EPPs, and specialty area programs. The sections being addressed today govern EPP approval, EPP admissions, and requirements for clinical experiences for EPP candidates. This item proposes to amend the approval of EPP Rule Section -.04 and admission to EPP Rule Section .08 to include regional and nationally accredited recognized accreditation organization recognized by the Council for Higher Education Accreditation, CHIA, or the United States Department of Education, USDOE. To be CHIA recognized, an institution's accreditor must meet the CHIA standards for recognition. For USDOE recognition, an institution's accreditor must demonstrate that accreditation standards are enforced effectively. The USDOE primarily recognizes accreditors with programs leading to certification as opposed to degree-granting programs. My colleague will present on the remainder of this item.
Thank you. Michael Derline, Deputy Executive Director of Policy and Research with the State Board. Additionally, there are recommendations before you related to clinical practice and clinical mentoring. On October 16th, 2024, the board and department staff held a licensure review committee meeting. During that meeting, we received significant feedback from them on this recommendation. Essentially, they would like to move to a place where EdTPA is removed for all clinical practice pathways. The recommendation before you reflects a desire to improve clinical practice across the board, so not just with the internship clinical practice pathway. So there are recommendations related to the observation tools that mentors have to use and the frequency of observations that must occur during clinical practice. In February, we will bring additional recommendations to move forward the recommendation to remove the EdTPA assessment. With that, happy to take any questions you may have.
We have a recommendation. Is there a desire for this board to take action? Is there a motion?
I make the motion.
Ms. Maxwell moves to accept. Is there a second? Ms. McInturf seconds. Further discussion? Yes, Dr.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all so much for working on this. I appreciate that very much. Also, because of the rigorous clinical practices that our universities will ensure that our candidates are participating in, I think something we need to think about, because there are other pathways, students, pre-service teachers coming into our state, because we need all the help we can get as far as recruiting teachers. I think, in the future, we maybe need to look at the clinical practices that our future pre-service teachers are receiving from other licensure programs.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? No comments or questions. We have a recommendation, a motion and a second for education preparation rule 0520, 02, 04.04, 0.08, and 0.10. This requires a roll call vote. Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Alberson.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. McInturf.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item is state approved textbooks, science. Mr. Hayden Shadden.
Good morning, Hayden Shadden, the State Textbook and Instructional Material Quality Commission has prepared a final list of textbooks and instructional resources for Section D Science. TCA 491302A9 states that it is the duty of the State Board of Education, and the State Board has the power to prescribe the use of textbooks and other instructional materials based on recommendations of the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission for the various subjects taught or used in conjunction with public schools. TCA 49.6.2202A requires the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission prepare a list of standard editions of textbooks and instructional materials for approval by the State Board of Education for the use in public schools in the state. TCA 49.6.2201N1A also provides that the Commission, through its chair, may appoint an advisory panel of expert teachers and other experts in each subject area or grade level to advise the Commission on textbook and instructional material selections. The chair of the Commission led the advisory panel application review between October 2023 and March 2024. During the March 2024 meeting, the Commission accepted applications to fill an advisory panel consisting of science educators. Their applications were scored by both the Commission and subject matter experts at the Tennessee Department of Education. They also approved the scoring rubric for materials focusing on 3 categories. First, publishers had to provide Tennessee standard alignment guides. Second, materials had to cover 100% of the state standards to align with Chapter 990 of the Public Acts of 2022. And third, materials had to meet 80% of the quality indicators outlined by the Commission.
The panelists conducted independent reviews between April 26th and June 28th, 2024. These reports were disseminated to the Commission members during the July 30, 2024 meeting. Publishers who wished to appeal the initial decision made by panelists had the opportunity to resubmit their revised texts to the Commission during August and September 2024. Following first reading by the board in August 2024, the Commission met again on October 2nd, 2024 to hear publisher appeals to the initial panel reviews and consider any public comment, written or verbal. There were no publishers who wished to speak regarding their appeal, and the Commission received no public comments, either written or verbal. All publishers who did submit an appeal to the Commission during August and September 2024, upon re-review and scoring by expert panelists, were recommended for approval. On October 2nd, 2024, the Commission voted 9-1 to approve the recommended list before you today for Section D science textbooks and instructional materials. This item presents the final science textbooks recommended by the Commission for approval by the State Board upon final reading. The Tennessee Textbook and Instructional Material Quality Commission recommends the approval of this item on final reading, and the SBE staff concurs with this recommendation. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
We have a recommendation to approve state-approved textbook Section D Science. Is there a motion to take such action? Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second? Ms. Johnson seconds. Are there any questions? No questions. All in favor of approving state-approved textbook Section D on science, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Shedden.
Thank you.
Next item, District and School Operations Repeal School Safety Rule. Ms. Lori Paisley.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lori Paisley, Assistant Commissioner of the Coordinated School Health Division at the department. This item proposes repealing State Board School Safety Rule 0520-01-02-.30 as the requirements for school safety are in law, and there is no need to duplicate them in rule. Through the support of Governor Bill Lee and the Tennessee General Assembly, the state has made unprecedented investments in school safety, and the requirements for school safety are included in the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act establishes specific and consistent requirements for districts related to providing a safe school environment, including the formation of district and school safety teams and requirements for the development of comprehensive safety plans. Furthermore, this rule contains requirements for districts to conduct at least 2 earthquake drills each year if the district is within 100 miles of the New Madrid fault line. Previously, state law required districts within the New Madrid fault line zone to conduct earthquake drills and required the state board to promulgate rules to effectuate this requirement. The requirement was removed from law in 2018, and therefore state board rules on earthquake drills for districts within the New Madrid fault line zone are no longer relevant or necessary. State board staff held a rulemaking hearing on October 8, 2024 for public feedback. There are no changes between first and final reading. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on final reading. The state board staff concurs with this recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Paisley. We have a recommendation on district and school operations repealing school safety rule. Is there a motion to accept this? Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Mullenhour seconds. Any comments or discussion? I want to make it clear, we're not repealing safety. It's already in the law, so didn't want people to get ideas that we were repealing safety. If none, this does require a roll call vote. Yes.
Mr. Darnell. Mr. Darnell?
Darnell.
Sorry. Mr. Cobbins.
That's all right.
Mr. Cobbins. Aye. Ms. Hopperson?
Aye.
Mr. Holt?
Aye.
Mr. Jensen?
Aye.
Ms. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell,
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre,
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Wells,
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item is health education core standards. Ms. Paisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lori Paisley, Assistant Commissioner of Coordinated School Health Division at the Department. TCA 49-1-302A8 authorizes the State Board of Education to approve all academic standards and adopt rules and policies governing courses of study in the public schools. Additionally, State Board Rule 0520-01-03-.031 calls for the State Board to adopt academic standards for each subject area, grades K through 12. The approved standards are to be the basis for planning instructional programs in each local school system. The State Board recently approved revised health education standards at their November 3rd, 2023 meeting. Chapter 571 of the Public Acts of 2024, PC 571, amended TCA 496-1304A13 to require family life curriculum to provide instruction on the detection, intervention, prevention, and treatment of internet crimes against children involving sexting, sextortion, and the exploitation of a minor. Technology safety standards were included in the recent revision to grades 6 through 8 health education course standards. However, grades 9 through 12 health education course standards do not include technology safety. This item proposes new standards to ensure that students are instructed on internet crimes starting in the 2024-25 school year in accordance with PC 571. This item also proposes grammatical and technical corrections to the grades K through 5 and grades grades 6 through 8 standards that do not change any content. Between first and final reading, additional technical corrections were made to the grades K through 5 and grades 6 through 8 standards that do not change any of that content. The Department of Education recommends acceptance on this item on final reading. State Board staff concurs with this recommendation.
We have a recommendation for health education court standards. Is there a motion to accept this recommendation? Mr. Wells moves. Is there a second?
Second with a comment.
Ms. Albertson seconds.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Mullenhour.
Comment. So, recognizing bullying, identifying, establishing a process, reporting bullying and so forth, that exists in K through 5, it exists in the 6 through 8 curriculum. I didn't find it in the 9 through 12 curriculum. Is there a reason for that omission?
Yes, thank you for the question. And we've talked about this before, but when there's something like bullying taught in K through 5 and 6 through 8, each grade level you build upon that. And in high school, there are areas of health education that must be taught that are not taught to our lower grades, so they have a little bit less time to do that. However, that is included, and it may seem a little broad and vague, but excuse me, in the 9 through 12, in the area of relationships. I don't know if you've looked at that, but that is included in that instruction.
Okay. I may have missed it. I searched for that keyword specifically and couldn't find it in the 9 through 12.
Yeah, bullying wouldn't be specifically mentioned.
Okay.
And in human growth and development at the high school level, there's a lot of instruction on relationships, personal relationships.
Okay. I'll follow up with your team on this one. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further questions? We have a motion and a second to approve health education course standards. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Paisley.
Thank you.
Next item, academic and instructional requirements, promotion and retention rule 05200103.16. Dr. Jennifer Jordan.
I think it's green now. Good afternoon. Jennifer Jordan, Assistant Commissioner of Special Education and Student Supports. The State Board Promotion and Retention Rule 05200103.16 outlines promotion and retention requirements for K-8 students. The rule also details pathways to fourth grade promotion for third grade students who score approaching or below in the ELA portion of the TCAP in accordance with TCA 49631115. This item revises the rule to align with two pieces of legislation passed in the 2024 legislative session. The first revision is Chapter 829 of the Public Acts of 2024, PC 829, authorizes a parent or guardian of a student enrolled in kindergarten through second grade to elect to retain the student in the student's current grade if the student has a documented academic or behavior delay, and the parent or guardian believes that the retention may be beneficial to the student. PC 829 requires the State Board of Education to promulgate rules to define a documented academic or behavior delay. The rule defines a documented academic delay as a student who is receiving Tier 3 academic interventions through the Response to Instruction and Intervention Framework, and who currently has a student intervention plan in the area of math or reading, or an individualized learning plan for characteristics of dyslexia, also known as ILPD. B, the rule defines a documented behavioral delay as a student who is receiving Tier 3 behavioral interventions through the Response to Instruction and Intervention Framework, and who currently has a student intervention plan for behavior. The second part is Chapter 989 of the Public Acts of 2023, PC 989, amended TCA 49631115 to include a conference pathway for students who do not demonstrate adequate growth on the fourth grade ELA TCAP, beginning with the students in fourth grade in the 2023-24 school year. A conference pathway may be convened for fourth grade students who are required to show adequate growth on the fourth grade ELA TCAP to be promoted to the fifth grade, but do not demonstrate adequate growth. PC 989 requires that the conference include the following categories of participants: the student's principal, ELA teacher, and parent or guardian. A majority of the categories of participants required to be present in the conference are required to make a recommendation to promote the student to fifth grade, with tutoring supports or retain the student in fourth grade. This item updates the rule to align with PC 989. State Board staff held a rulemaking hearing on October the 8th, 2024 to collect public feedback. The department also shared the proposed rule with special education directors, RTI Square working groups, school psychologists, and with the Students with Disabilities Advisory Council for feedback. Between first and final reading, revisions were made at the request of state board members to add a requirement that the LEA or public charter school notify in writing that the parent or guardian's request to retain their student is confirmed. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading. The SBE staff concurs with this recommendation.
We have a recommendation for academic instructional requirements, promotion and retention rule 052001-03-.16. Is there a motion to accept this recommendation? Mr. Holt moves. Is there a second? Ms. McInturf seconds. Is there discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Holt.
I just noted, this is very minor, but I was just reading through the new language in this version of the rule, the changes that were made between first and second reading. In subsection 6C in the red line, and it looks like there may be just a minor typo that hopefully we can just fix as part of approving the rule, assuming that's what the board chooses to do. The red line says, following a timely request made in accordance with paragraph 6, this rule by of the parent or guardian. I think that this rule should just be after the word by. So in accordance with paragraph 6, or sorry, of this rule by the parent or guardian, instead of this rule by of the parent or guardian. So just a little typo.
Good catch. Other questions? Mr. Molnar?
I just wanted to thank the department for responding to the previous request of this board regarding this language. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? No questions or comments, and we're voting on academic instruction requirements, promotion, and retention rule 0520010316. This requires a roll call vote. Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Albertson.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item is academic instructional requirements, universal student screeners, and state adopted benchmark assessment rule 05200103-.15. Dr. Wall. Oh. Is there something we need to talk about?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Holt found that typographical error, but the body didn't take action to authorize its correction. So I think what we would need to do is we could take a separate vote to instruct staff to correct the error that he found. But if we didn't do that, the authority wouldn't be there to make that change.
All right, Mr. Holt didn't identify a change. You want to move that we make that change?
Yeah, thank you, and I'd like to move just to have that typographical error corrected by the staff in the version of the rule that's been approved by the board.
Second.
Mr. Mullenhour seconds.
Yes, sir.
Further discussion? That can be by voice vote?
It's a rule on final.
Okay.
I'd be safe about it.
Go ahead. Mr. Griffin, call. This is to make the change that Mr. Holt recommended.
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Albertson.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
All right, so that made the change. Do we have to vote again on the rule?
Sir, the body just instructed the staff to make that correction. I think you're fine.
Thank you, Mr. Next item is academic instructional requirements, universal student screeners, and state adopted benchmark assessment rule 0520010315. Dr. Wall.
Thank you. Christy Wall, Assistant Commissioner of Academics, Tennessee Department of Education. This item is coming before you on final reading. The Universal Student Screeners and State Adopted Benchmark Assessments Rule 0520-01-03-.15 outlines requirements for local education agencies and public charter schools to annually administer approved universal reading screeners to K-3 students in accordance with the Tennessee Literacy Success Act. The rule also effectuates requirements of the Tennessee Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act regarding the use of benchmark assessments to identify priority students for summer programming and pre- and post-test requirements. Chapter 639 of the Public Acts of 2024, PC 639, amends the Tennessee Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act to remove the requirement that LEAs and public charter schools administer a pre-test in summer learning camps, after-school mini camps, and learning loss bridge camps. As such, this item updates the rule to remove references to the pretest to align with the update to PC 639. State Board staff held a rulemaking hearing on October the 8th of 2024 to collect public feedback. Minor edits were made to the legal authority citation of this rule. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading, and the State Board staff concurs with the recommendation. Happy to take questions on this item.
We have a recommendation for academic and instructional requirements, universal student screeners, and state adopted benchmark assessment rule 05200103.15. Is there a motion to accept these changes? Final reading. Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second? Ms. Maxwell seconds. Are there any questions? No questions. This does require a roll call vote. Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Albertson,
Aye.
Mr. Holt,
Aye.
Mr. Jensen,
Aye.
Ms. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell,
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre,
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Wells,
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Wall. Next item, Residential Mental Health Facilities Rule 05200120.02 through 05. Mr. Scott, any new?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. My name is Scott Indermill, Senior Director for IDEA and Non-Traditional Education Programs in the Division of Federal Programs and Oversight. State Board of Education Residential Mental Health Facilities Rule 0520-01-20-.02 through -0.05 outline requirements for the admission of Tennessee public school students to out-of-state residential mental health facilities in compliance with TCA 493370. TCA 493370B requires local education agencies to allocate state and local funding to out-of-state residential mental health facilities when certain conditions are met. Public Chapter 884 of the 113th General Assembly, enacted in the 2024 legislative session, made the following changes to the conditions for the admission set forth in TCA 493370. First, remove the condition that residential mental health facilities serves at least 15 Tennessee students per school year. Second, remove the condition that the student has an active individual education program at the time the student is placed at the residential mental health facility. Third, remove the condition that the student be enrolled in and have attended a Tennessee public school for the full school year immediately preceding the student's placement at the facility, and instead requires that the student be enrolled in and attending a Tennessee public school at the time of the student's admission to the facility. Public Chapter 884 also added a requirement that the student's parents be residents of Tennessee at the time of the student's placement in the facility. The State Board approved an emergency rule of these revisions at the July 15th, 2024 special called meeting. State Board staff held a rulemaking hearing on October 8th, 2024 for public feedback. There have been no changes to this item since first reading. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on second reading. The State Board of Education staff concurs with this recommendation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. We have a recommendation for Residential Mental Health Facilities Rule 05200120.02 through 05. Is there a motion to accept these recommendations?
So moved.
Mr. Mullenhour moves. Is there a second? Vice Chair Cobbins seconds. Is there any questions or comments? Mr. Mullenhour.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to unpack this quickly. I raised a concern a few months ago, and in summary, the way that this rule is written, a child who's in, I'll just use Memphis and in Mountain City as the extremes, a child who's living in Memphis might find themselves in a situation where the only available facility in Tennessee that has the capacity to provide the care under this rule is in Mountain City, and therefore they would have to either go live in Mountain City or find some other means. They would not be able to, for example, take advantage of a facility that's just across the border, half an hour from their home under this particular rule. It's my understanding. Stop me if I'm mistaken in this. In digging into this and trying to figure out how much flexibility do we have as a board to try to address this issue, because the concern being a family that doesn't have the resource needed to care for a child might very well find themselves in a situation where they cannot access out-of-state facilities because one bed is available on the other side of the state 8 or 9 hours away. In digging into this and in looking at the legislative history, and I appreciate the staff helping me kind of do that deep dive, I concluded at the end of the day that I think it would be an overreach on the part of this board to change those requirements. I don't like it. I think it has the potential to leave a child or a family or more sort of left out. But I think we also have to be very disciplined as a board about giving deference to the legislature and not finding ourselves getting ahead of them. So that's my comment. My question is, Are there any bills coming up in this next session that you think might, we might be able to either attach an edit to, or is there a legislator that might have an interest in revisiting the law that essentially ties our hands behind our back in addressing this particular issue?
Sure. I'm unfamiliar with any bills that we can attach. I could defer to legal or our the general counsel for that information.
Okay. So I'll work with our team and see if there's maybe an option. But I want to basically raise the flag and say I don't like it. I think we're going to leave some people. I think some people are going to fall between the cracks. I'm not suggesting that it's intentional on the part of the legislature, but we would need to look to them to fix it so that we're not overreaching.
Sure. And if I could just provide
please.
some clarity to your comment. I know you had mentioned that if there was a parent seeking some help for their student, and there was a bed available across state lines, maybe 20 minutes away, that's going to be a decision that's going to be made between that parent, that physician, and where that placement is. There's nothing preventing a parent from placing that student across the border where that facility is closer. It just wouldn't meet the criteria set forth in this statute and state board rule for the allocation of funding. We don't prevent the parents from making that decision because we don't have a seat at the table.
Sure. So to restate what I understand you to be saying, they could pay for it out of their own pocket, of course, if they wanted to get care, but the state funding that would be available to one student under one set of circumstances would not be available to this student simply by the mere fact that a bed is available on the other side of the state.
Yeah, the LEA maintains enrollment, depending, it's K-out code is the code that we use for students placed out of state. So that LEA, where that residency enrollment is, continues to collect that funding.
Right.
And then, again, if it's a student with special education and an IEP, they would work to maintain that FAPE responsibility as well.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak to that. I'll get with Nathan on this one later.
Thank you.
I think that's a good comment, Mr. Mullenhour. Yesterday, I recall you heard about something that is allowed people from Tennessee can do something in Arkansas if it's within a 50-mile radius or something like that. I can't even recall what that one was, but I think the point you're making is a legitimate point that ought to be looked at. Any other questions? So we have a recommendation and a motion and a second for the residential mental facility Hills Facilities Rule 052001, 2002 through 05. This requires a roll call vote. Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Alverson.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson.
Aye.
Ms. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour. Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Motion passes.
Thank
sir.
you.
Next item is middle grades policy 2102. Ms. Deborah Knoll.
Deborah Knoll, Assistant Commissioner of College, Career, and Technical Education, presenting on final reading of the middle grades policy. Tennessee State Board of Education outlines the requirements and expectations for students in grades 5 through 8. Chapter 979 of the Public Acts of 2022 expanded access to computer science education to ensure that elementary, middle, and high school students are prepared for evolving workforce needs. In addition to requiring computer science coursework, Department provided professional development and a new computer science endorsement pathway for educators. PC 979 requires, starting in the 24 and 25 school year, that middle school students take at least one course of computer science education that includes instruction for at least one grading period during the one full school year of their middle school career. Chapter 693 of the Public Acts of 2024 amended the law to clarify that the middle school computer science course requirement applies to students who enroll in the lowest grade offered at a middle school starting in the 24-25 school year. This item revises the middle school grades policy to add the middle school computer science course requirement so that the policy now aligns with the law. There have been no changes to this item since first reading. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading, and the State Board of Education staff concurs with this recommendation.
We have a recommendation for middle grades policy 2.102 on final reading. Is there a motion to accept this recommendation? Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second? Ms. Johnson seconds. Further discussion? No discussion. All in favor for accepting middle grades policy 2.102 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, Ms. Knoll, career and technical education course standards.
Great. Good morning again. Deborah Knoll, Assistant Commissioner, College Career and Technical Education, presenting on final reading for the Career and Technical Education course standards. This item includes new and revised course standards for all 16 CTE career clusters, including elective courses and middle school career awareness, exploration, and career advising and planning courses. This item also includes new courses within the following CTE career clusters: agriculture, food and natural resources, human services, and information technology. Between first and final reading, the department solicited additional feedback on the proposed standards. The public comment period for the standards was from August 23rd, 2024 through September 23rd, 2024. Between first and final reading, minor revisions were made. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading, and the State Board of Education staff concurs with this recommendation.
Thank you. We have a recommendation on final reading for career and technical education course standards. Is there a motion to accept this recommendation? Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second? Mr. Mullenhour seconds. Any other comments or questions? I would just say that I really like the content of the courses, particularly the STEM, how it focuses not only the technical skills, but also the durable skills, critical thinking, teamwork, and include the work-based learning opportunities. So, well done. No other questions? All in favor then accepting career and technical education course standards, signify by saying, on final reading, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, state identified reward schools. Mr. David Laird.
Good afternoon, Chairman Eby, members of the board. I am David Laird, Assistant Commissioner for Assessment, Accountability, and Research, and I'm very pleased to present to the board an item related to the state identified 23-24 reward schools. In accordance with TCA 491602, the Tennessee Department of Education is charged with presenting to the state board a list of reward schools. For the 23-24 school year, reward schools are those that have an overall federal accountability score equal to or greater than 3.1 out of a possible 4 points, which corresponds to earning an A in our federal accountability system. The calculation is based on a wide variety of indicators, which include TCAP scores, improvement in TCAP scores relative to goals, the calculation of TCAP growth via TBOS, English language proficiency, chronic absenteeism, graduations rates, and our Ready Graduate Indicator. The calculation is based on the performance of all students at the school, but it's also calculated for various subgroups, racial and ethnic categories, students with disabilities, English language learners, economically disadvantaged students, and then a weighted average is calculated overall. Out of 1,691 eligible schools, 377 schools earned the reward designation this year, which is about 22% of schools that were eligible in the state, and is very consistent with what we observed last year. Schools have had an opportunity to verify all of the data that was used in this calculation, and district offices have been provisionally made aware of these designations on the 19th of November. Obviously, pending board approval, they will become official, and the department will send letters to each of these schools this afternoon, and a public press release will come out from the department announcing their reward status. So with that, the department recommends approval of this item on first and final reading. The state board staff concurs, and I'm happy to take any additional questions.
We have a recommendation for state identified 2023-2024 reward schools. Is there a motion to accept?
Make the motion.
Dr. Maxwell moves. Is there a second? Ms. Albertson seconds. Is there a discussion? Just congratulations to those. All in favor for approving the state identified 2023-2024 reward schools signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, state identified exemplary districts.
Thank you, Chairman Eby, members of the board. I'm David Laird, Assistant Commissioner for Assessment and Accountability and Research. And I'm also happy again to provide to share an additional item related to state identified 23-24 exemplary districts. In accordance with TCA 491602, Tennessee Department of Education is charged with presenting to the state board a list of districts that receive the highest rating in our accountability system, or the exemplary district rating. The calculation of the district accountability system is very similar, with some minor differences relative to the states. Many of the same indicator data is included, and it's rolled up in the same way, in that we evaluate both the performance of all students plus the performance of individual subgroups, and then calculate a weighted average of the two. There are 10 districts that are identified as receiving the exemplary status. And if Chairman Eby, if you concur, I'd be happy to read them into the record. They are Alcoa City Schools, Arlington Community Schools, Bell City Schools, Clinton City Schools, Collierville City Schools, Dayton City Schools, Jackson County Schools, Lebanon Special School District, Milan Special School District, and Van Buren County Schools. And so with that, the department recommends approval of this item on first and final read, and the state board staff concurs.
I have a recommendation on first and final reading for the exemplary districts. Is there a motion to accept? Mr. Jensen moves, Mr. Wells seconds. Any discussion? Just outstanding to these districts. Says they're doing something right. That's great. We like to celebrate that. No other comments? All in favor then for accepting the exemplary district list signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, Dr. Laird.
Thank you, Chairman Eby. David Laird, Assistant Commissioner for Assessment and Accountability and Research, and I am presenting an item related to the state identified 23-24 districts in need of improvement. In accordance with TCA 491602, the Department of Education is charged with presenting to the state board a list of districts that receive the lowest accountability determination, also known as districts in need of improvement. The overall calculation is based on all of the same data, and it's calculated in the same way that I've identified previously, in that it's calculated for all students. It's rolled up for individual subgroups, a weighted average is calculated. The only thing that is unique to this identification is that instead of identifying a district or a school that earns a letter grade, we essentially enforce a cutoff here where we're only identifying districts in the bottom 5% statewide in terms of overall performance. So we line up, essentially rank order every district in the state in terms of this overall accountability measure, and we grab the bottom 5%. There are 10 districts that were identified as being in need of improvement in this year. And so with that said, the department recommends approval of this item on first and final read, and the state board staff concurs. I'm happy to take any questions.
We have a recommendation for listing of the districts in need of improvement. Is there a motion to accept this list? Mr. Wells moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Mullenhour seconds. Are there questions or comments? I've got a question. So obviously these are the bottom 5%. What are we doing to lift them up in the future so they come off this list? There will always be a list of the bottom 5%, but what can we do to help improve these schools?
I'd have to defer to some of my colleagues. I'm more on the analysis end of things and less involved in the support piece of that. So I would defer to my other colleagues in the room.
I mean, we're definitely looking at school turnaround as a major priority coming into not only this next legislative session, but just something that has always been kind of elusive, not for Tennessee only, but for all states. It's just very difficult. We saw a great presentation yesterday. So we're really trying to think better about how we can, provide those supports and resources. And then, of course, we also have our collaboration with the state board staff with really trying to think about how we can address some of these issues in the hearings that are going to be, as a result of the accountability conversations. So this is definitely high on our to-do list, and, you know, sometimes it is just a matter of just ensuring they have the right supports and resources and all those things necessary, and it's just something that we've been talking about a lot. So, yeah, the turnaround team was here yesterday, so.
Good.
Thank you.
And one thing, not asking for it now, but what might be helpful is, obviously, this list is done every year. How much does this list change? Is, you know, the ones that are on the bottom 5%, do they move up? And obviously, I mean, you could be 50%, you know, and still be in the bottom 5%. I mean, if you're even at this level. So it would be helpful to know how much this list changed. Are there certain districts that are more challenging than others, or certain schools or whatever? That might be helpful to know.
That's an item I'm sure we could follow up on. I know there are some districts on this list that have been on the list in the past, but not entirely. There has been some turnover on the list this year.
Because, I mean, we want to celebrate those coming off the list, just like we're celebrating the reward schools, et cetera. So.
And Chairman, I would say the use of the mechanic of the bottom 5%, the intent of that is to focus resources predominantly, right? We're trying to only make sure we're identifying schools that truly in greatest need, and we can focus and marshal support where the need is greatest. On the evaluation side of things, we're continuing to monitor that. We want to make sure that that continues to be a meaningful number, and we're not just catching a district that might actually be serving their, you know, producing great results for their kids, but we're catching them because we're using that percentage mechanic. So it's certainly something that we attend to over time.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor then for approving the state identified 2023-2024 in need of improvement districts list, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Laird. Next, textbook and instructional materials waiver request, Houston County Schools Founders Academic Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, Pre-Calculus, and Calculus Statistics. And before she presents, this is Ms. Brianna Summers of the State Board staff. This is her first presentation to the State Board for an item, and I will say that as long as you've been on the State Board, we've been really impressed with what you brought to the board and look forward to bringing many more. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Eby. Good afternoon, Chair Eby and members. My name is Brianna Summers. I'm the Director of Policy and Academics at the State Board, and I have the last item before you in your afternoon, so I'll be brief. But it is a textbook and instructional materials waiver request for Houston County Schools for using Founders Academy for multiple high school math courses. Tennessee Code Annotated 491302 charges the State Board to prescribe textbooks and instructional materials based on recommendations from the Textbook Commission. A perfect example of this was the item you discussed earlier for science textbooks. Additionally, TCA 4962206 authorizes the State Board to approve or deny waiver requests for LEAs that would like to use instructional materials or textbooks that are not on the list. This process is further outlined in our textbook rule and in guidance on our website. The State Board originally approved a waiver for Houston County Schools in 2021 upon opening a virtual school. This waiver is to renew those existing subjects and add calculus and statistics as they build out their virtual school. Based on subject matter feedback from the Department of Education, application updates conducted by Houston County Schools, and other rule criteria, the State Board staff recommends approval of this item on first and final reading to be in effect until the next math textbook adoption cycle. Happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you. We have a recommendation. Is there a motion to accept the recommendation? Mr. Wells moves. Is there a second?
I was really trying to think of some hard questions to ask.
We need
I didn't have any.
We need
Textbook
a second.
waivers, you know?
Ms. Mullenhour, will you second first?
I'll second.
Okay, now you can ask your hard questions. Are there any questions? So they're asking for a waiver. Are they not able to use the textbooks that are already approved?
Great question. They did, when they first in 2021 opened their virtual academy, they started with a textbook that was on the approved list and found that it wasn't supporting students in the way of their specific virtual environment. So that's why they made the request in 2021.
And so then this waiver will continue until we adopt new textbooks. And obviously, when we adopt new textbooks in the future, we will look to see for textbooks that are good for virtual environments.
Exactly. You're reading my mind, Chair Evie. That is on Michael and I's to-do list.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, we have a recommendation on textbook and instructional material waiver request for Houston County Schools. Founders Academy, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other business?
Mr. Chair?
Chairman,
Yes,
I have one,
Just-
actually two requests.
Go ahead.
I would like an update at our next workday on AI and just sort of get a feel for where we're headed, what we're thinking from the department, and what issues are around that. Without being exhaustive in this, I'd appreciate an update. The second thing is, in light of our teacher discipline, I would appreciate, in a similar environment, a overview, and I sort of hesitate to make this request because I don't want it at minute detail, but just an better understanding of what the training regimen is with regard to the things we discussed in the teacher discipline thing. Just a, yeah, is it occurring at the EPP? Is it at the district level? Is it the school level? I'd gather some more comfort if I understood the breadth and depth of it without, not a deep dive I'm asking for. I just want to get a sense of where it's occurring.
Good comments.
Mr.
Any
Chair?
other? Yes, Mr. Mullenhour.
I just had a procedural question. In our last meeting in August, we had item 5M, as in mother. This is the charter schools rule that, as I recall, passed on first reading, and I was looking forward to seeing it on final, and was just wondering when that might happen.
I might ask that our general counsel speak to that. We discussed this yesterday at the workshop. That was the presentation, and we decided to defer the rule to a later meeting, but if our general counsel could clarify, we'll let you know the timeline.
Sure. Rachel Supay, General Counsel. As Dr. Morrison said, we have decided to bring the rule in December at a special called meeting as an emergency rule, and that way it'll be in effect throughout the application process for these charters. And then we will also bring a permanent rule on final reading as soon as that is complete. We're incorporating, some public feedback and addressing a few last-minute questions, and then it'll come back before the board.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, the special called meeting in December that I guess has been sort of percolating in the last week or so, that is to address this particular item?
It'll address the emergency rule related to that item. It'll also be when you vote on the accountability framework for opportunity charter schools. And then, as our general counsel said, we are still figuring out whether we'll be able to bring the permanent rule on final reading at that special call meeting, or if that will come in February. So there's several kind of related parts to the opportunity charter school area, but happy to talk offline too to make sure you're clear.
That sounds like a party. Okay, thank you.
And that special called meeting is Wednesday, December 18th, is that correct? And that is a virtual meeting. Yes, Mr. Wells?
And I think, are we also going to talk about the disciplinary action that we rolled? Is that in the?
So I'll confer with our counsel on that. We'll probably bring it in February at the regular scheduled meeting, but we're still figuring that out, and we'll report back.
Any further items for discussion? Yes, Mr. Cobbins.
Just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Morrison and the team for bringing us here to this destination. I think it's been really informative to see how industry and education can collaborate and create opportunities for Tennesseans. So thank you for bringing us here.
And thank you to TCAT here and for all the hosting that they've done and for the tours. And I think we can see a real collaboration between the industry and the schools and K through 12.
since it's a season of gratitude, I'll again jump in there too. And I want to thank our board members first and foremost for the time that you spend in this really important space and this work, to travel for these meetings, to spend the time in preparation for these meetings and all the items that are coming before you that affect students and families across our state. We are really always grateful, but especially this time of year. And also to our Department of Education staff, not only for the collaboration and partnership, but your willingness to travel for these out-of-state meetings or out-of-town meetings. I think it is really valuable. I think it's really important that we do this, and I'm glad that this meeting has been such a success in terms of the partnerships and the work that we've been able to see at this campus, but also recognize that it is an extra ask of our team and the department's team. So thanks to everyone who was traveling for this meeting this week.
Any further comments? No further comments. The meeting is adjourned.